everybody. Welcome to another episode of Purple Insider. Matthew Coller here, and what a day it was at TCO Performance Center as players were talking about a real football game coming up, and it was JJ McCarthy's first time as the QB1 walking up for that Wednesday press conference. There will be many, many more in his future, but I want to bring you what he had to say today about being prepared. Some interesting comments from Kevin O'Connell, and why don't we get some health updates going as well? We might as well do that off the bat, and there will be official injury reports coming. But as far as Harrison Smith goes, I'll read you what Kevin O'Connell had to say about that, and then we'll get into the McCarthy stuff. He said that Harrison Smith participated in the walkthrough today, but will not practice, and the hope is that they can ramp him up. He is back in the building, in meetings, building up his workload for the week. We'll see where he's at throughout the remainder of the week. So that didn't sound to me like, hey, look out, everybody, number 22 is coming back. It'll be something to watch going forward, but maybe they have to prepare themselves for the possibility that Harrison Smith won't be playing. And as far as Christian Darrisaw, well, let me just bring you right off the top here what O'Connell had to say about Christian Darrisaw. Then we'll get into all the McCarthy stuff, but it was a update that sounded like, I badly want Darrisaw to be ready to go, but I understand that there are many, many football games to be played. So here's what Kevin O'Connell said about Christian Darrisaw's health.
Is Darrisaw 100%? Does he look like he was before the injury?
Yeah, he looks, he looks really good. He's consistently, I think he surprised even himself early on in training camp as we began that kind of really crafted plan by Tyler and the doctors and Christian himself. I think in the moment he has, had some really, really good progression days where we've been able to stack it up. And we're in game week now, and he's going to take a lot of reps today, if not all of them. And then we'll see how he feels, and we'll see ultimately Christian's such an important player to our team that we want to make sure that we're smart about the plan. It's more so just about knowing we've got 17 games, including a short week next week, and then ultimately, our trip overseas. Like, there's got to be a big picture mindset to a player of Christian's caliber, where this game, all that matters is this game to the Minnesota Vikings Monday night in Chicago. But our jobs are to make sure we're doing what's best for the team. For the greater duration of 17 plus games, and what that means for Monday night, I don't know as of right now. I just know what my eyes have shown me, what Christian's demonstrated, have given us through a really calculated plan a good possibility of Monday night.
So there you go. Good possibility, O'Connell says, about Christian Darrisaw, but could not lock it in 100% because they have to see how he responds to the practice reps. So there's a few different things that I want to talk about tonight, but number one is the main question for you guys, and then I have an extra FanDuel question of the day. But the main just question I want to talk about is realistic expectations for this game. JJ McCarthy in Chicago, and we know it's going to be a crazy atmosphere. We know Chicago can be a bit of a house of horrors, that they have a good defensive coordinator. They've got talent on their defensive side. There's some new weapons that he's actually working with because he didn't get to practice in training camp with Justin Jefferson, and Adam Thielen is here. What's a realistic expectation for JJ McCarthy? Not best case scenario, not worst case scenario. Give me realistic. And so let's go through what Kevin O'Connell had to say. And the first question off the bat, naturally, from my friend Chris Long, he said to Kevin O'Connell, hey man, it's Soldier Field, it's Monday Night Football. Like, how do you keep JJ McCarthy on the tracks? And I thought Kevin O'Connell had a very interesting answer to this question.
We've tried to build a world where running the offense and playing quarterback is a collection of really small things. Some would even consider them routine things. And can we do the routine things routinely? And then as the clear, obviously it's different than, the Egan practice fields here, or anything he's experienced, at least in the NFL. I think he's got a lot of really good experience, at the collegiate level in front of 100,000+ people. But it's still Monday Night Football. Everything you said, all of that, we don't just start talking about playing quarterback in the NFL this week for him. It's about doing a lot of the things that make up playing quarterback for us in our offense, with the guys in the huddle with him who were really excited about that group. And then just, locking in on the nuances and subtleties of the game plan that hopefully by Monday night we can make them as routine as possible. Then the ball gets kicked off, and he knows he's definitely not going to be alone out there from a standpoint of the coaching staff and myself, right there with him. Maybe me too much sometimes in his ear via the coach to quarterback system. But I know those 10 guys in the huddle, regardless of who's in the game, those guys are excited for number 9 to come in and call that first play.
I thought that was a really interesting approach there from Kevin O'Connell. And, we talk a lot about O'Connell as the quarterback whisperer, what he can do for quarterbacks and things like that, and how he uses his past experiences to help his quarterbacks. But sometimes it can be hard to put a real finger on that. Like, well, why is it? Why is it that O'Connell seems to work so well? And sometimes I will maybe get a little snarky and I will say, maybe it's because they have Justin Jefferson. And that's why he's so brilliant, right? Which there is definitely truth to that. But I think what he said right there of trying to create these things for the quarterback that become routine ways of approaching the scheme, routine ways of getting to the line of scrimmage and dealing with different problems that are presented by the opponent. So you don't feel like you are having to do something miraculous. Now, every once in a while, we have seen whether it was Kirk Cousins making, great throws with accuracy to Justin Jefferson down the field, or some of the rockets from Sam Darnold, or even the brief Josh Dobbs having to do some incredible things with his legs. If you're going to win as a quarterback in the NFL, there's 3-4 times a game that you have to do something that your coach cannot get in your headset, cannot tell you what to do. But how many times a game is that versus how many times you drop back? Most of the time, 90% of the time, it's something routine. It's seeing a defense. It's reading where you're supposed to go. It's checking into something that looks like it's going to work. Maybe it's checking into a run, or changing the pass protection, or whatever it might be. And so I like the way that he approaches that of, yes, it's a big stage. Yes, there's a lot going on here, but you're not alone out there. And if you just do the things that have become routine to you over the last 2 years of training camp, you're going to have a lot of success. And I feel like that doesn't overwhelm a quarterback. Like, that's making it sound way easier than it is. And my goodness, if everybody could just go out there and do the routine things, then, well, this game would be a heck of a lot easier than it actually is for quarterbacks. But I like the mental mindset of that from O'Connell, of these are the things that we do in this offense. These are the things that you've done. And if you keep doing them, if you keep getting rid of the ball, making the right decisions, throwing it to the right places, then things are going to work for you. Now, there's another part of JJ McCarthy, though, as he goes into his first game, his reputation over his career. And one of you said in the comments, like, I'll be glad to get his first snap, so we no longer have to say that McCarthy has never taken a first snap in the NFL. And that's a great point right there. I've probably said that myself 500 times. And even thinking about all the last minute opinions that are getting shared about McCarthy and what the Vikings are going to be, that just comes up time and time again. Well, he's never done it before. He's never done it. Well, once he does it, then he will have actually been out there, and we don't have to say that anymore. But what O'Connell was talking about, just in terms of JJ McCarthy's past, Kevin Seifert asked about throughout his high school life, throughout his college life. This is another thing you've heard a million times, but that he's only lost one game. And I even said it to Aaron Jones today, and I'll bring you that a little bit later as well. But Kevin O'Connell had a good answer to that when he was asked about the element of being a winner in the past. And does that matter? And, my analytical brain often goes to, well, look, and I've probably said it, college doesn't mean a whole heck of a lot. High school doesn't mean a whole heck of a lot. There's lots of guys, Tim Tebow or Ken Dorsey or whoever you want to go through in the past that have had a ton of college success, ton of high school success, but when they got to the league, it was a lot different. But O'Connell talked about McCarthy as a gamer type of quarterback, and that isn't a word that I think I've ever heard him say before. So here's his analysis on McCarthy and him as somebody who can elevate his game once he gets under the bright lights.
If you look at the records of the teams that JJ has been on going back to high school, I mean, they've won almost all of their games. And, I know there's a lot of things that always go into that, but what do you think it is about him what part do you think he plays in that kind of extended success, whether it's his personality traits or just the way he plays or the way he is or just happen to be on a lot of great teams?
Yeah, I would not discount the fact that a lot of the times when, JJ, whatever team he's been on, tends to be a good version of himself on game day. And there's a lot of guys that are talented. There's a lot of guys that can, light up the practice field every day. But the guys that can either take it to the game or maybe even be a better version of themselves in the game, have those, the gamer, whatever tag you want to put on it. I think he's got that trait. I think it's important he doesn't just solely rely on that trait. Showing up to Soldier Field, I think he pairs that with the work that he puts in throughout the week so that he's comfortable. And then, it's going to be his first start, in the NFL. I'm very much aware of that. He's aware of that. We're all aware of that. But that doesn't mean we put a ceiling over him. And at the same time, that doesn't mean because of all that success throughout his football journey, we raise the floor either. I want him focusing on the little details of doing his job against a really good defense. We're going to make some plays. They're going to make some plays. The ebbs and flows of the game. It's just, on to the next snap and start banking some of this experience and using it for your benefit moving forward.
Once again, there's O'Connell sort of bringing it back down to the micro, right? The macro is big, and like McCarthy's been a winner and all that sort of stuff, and this is his background and so forth. And O'Connell brings it back down to hey, let's focus on the things that you're supposed to do from a play to play and a drive to drive basis, which I really think does a good job of helping center his quarterbacks. I mean, his message last year to Sam Darnold was, yeah, you might have a big contract on the way. And yeah, this season means a lot to what your future is going to be, but you got to win this play, this rep, this down. And that seemed to really resonate with somebody like Sam Darnold. And I know some of it seems cliche, but it's almost like when O'Connell puts it that way, it doesn't seem as cliche. It seems like kind of profound that if you can whittle all of that down, then all of the noise of everything else kind of starts to go away. So I'll get to actually, we should make that the FanDuel question of the day because you guys have had great responses and I'm going to read a bunch of them momentarily. So let's make that the FanDuel question of the day is realistic. What is realistic? And if you are wondering for JJ McCarthy's first start, his over under for yardage is 220.5 on FanDuel. That seems pretty realistic to me. Do you think realistic should be higher? Do you think realistic should be lower for JJ McCarthy? So he was asked today about just how prepared he feels. And I thought to myself, well, man, he's had about 2 years to get ready for it. But here is McCarthy's answer to that.
First opportunity to start. How prepared do you feel? How much confidence do you have that you'll be able to go out there and have some success on Monday night?
Extremely prepared, most prepared I've felt in my life. Obviously, we still got to get, third down, red zone, all that stuff in. But I feel like, just talking with, Coach Wentz, Carson, just like he's breaking down, like, when he was going through his first start and when he was playing at Soldier at night and just like, first games, you never really know what you're going to get. So you could prepare as much as you want, but they could do a completely different thing. So the most important thing is, like I said earlier, just staying, locked into the simple things, locked into what my job is that play, and then reacting to what the defense is giving me. But very prepared and very confident.
Is it all like Michigan in your first start? Do you remember that? And does it feel the same?
It really doesn't, to be honest with you, Max. I feel like, that was pretty intense, this is very intense as well. But just playing so many big games at Michigan, obviously it's a different level here, but just having those reps of those emotions that you feel and how you handle them and how you manage them. But this one, there's just pure excitement, pure confidence, and I absolutely can't wait to get on the plane with my boys and get out there.
So I thought that answer stood out to me where he said more or less, like, I've already had these emotions before a game, where when he was getting to college after high school, because what happened with him in high school, he would have had some big moments and I think won a state championship in Illinois before going to IMG because of the pandemic, and Illinois didn't have football that year. So at IMG, he would have played in big games, but would it have been the same as playing in the big house in Michigan? Like, the jump in terms of the stage was enormous from playing at a high school, and obviously he's good at that high school and he's playing in big moments. And I'm sure at the time it was, very exciting for him, but it's nothing like playing at the big house and playing Ohio State or something like that. And maybe the NFL Monday Night Football stage is a lot closer to playing in the national championship, though I'll continue to say there's nothing like the NFL. The amount of people watching, the pressure, the competition, all that sort of stuff. But what he's saying is emotionally, he's already had those games where he had to walk out and try to win a game to go to the national championship against Nick Saban and Alabama, where he had to go out and play against Michael Penix, who he's going to see in week 2, and Washington, and try to win a national championship. That's the closest that you can get. He's had a little bit of a ramp up at US Bank Stadium a couple of times, but it's not really the same when it's preseason. Maybe this year he would have had some nerves, though. This is going to be something for him to deal with. But I think what I've always heard from McCarthy is that he puts effort into that element as well. It's not just effort into the X's and O's. It's not just effort into the scheme, who he's going to throw to, the defensive scout, but also just how he feels and controls himself and his emotions going into games. And he did that a lot at Michigan. The pregame meditation was, highlighted, but I think he does a lot of things to understand his own mental state in a situation like going into this game against Chicago. And that's, maybe the modern athlete, right, has a lot at their fingertips that can help them understand this stuff. I mean, back in the day, you were probably just like, I'm walking out there and this is what I'm doing. But now he builds that into his pregame routine. And also, I think if you understand how nervous you're going to be, you understand how much adrenaline there's going to be, that it can help you deal with that. I will really be watching closely, though, for that first drive. Does Kevin O'Connell say, all right, kid, let's throw a 20-yard dig to Justin Jefferson? Or, hey, why don't we send out Aaron Jones on, I talked to Jones about screen passes today, and talked to Byron Murphy in the locker room about, why it's so tough to stop Aaron Jones and screen passes and things like that. Does he try a couple of screens? Does he try a couple of handoffs and just get the ball rolling a little bit, a little play action, a little quick bubble or something to, Justin Jefferson, or a little 5-yard hitch? Or does he just start to air it out and say, shake off that rust right away? That will be something that I can't wait to find out on Monday night. But I think McCarthy, he is so thoughtful about every part of this that he's already running himself through what he's going to feel like when he gets out there on Monday night. I think that was really noticeable. And just speaking of his mindset, he had another answer about that. And I also asked him about the best advice that he has gotten so far heading into his first start.
You try to get your mind at just the moments before you take the field, especially in a game like this.
I just try to be completely present. At the end of the day, there's going to be, anxiousness, excitement, and, a whole lot of adrenaline. But at the end of the day, that's completely normal. And, accepting those emotions, you're able to let go of them a lot quicker than trying to deflect them and avoid them. So, I know I'm going to be amped up, but at the end of the day, I know that, Coach O'Connell is going to put me in a great position, and my teammates around me are going to, do everything they can to make sure we're successful each and every play. But, yeah, it's just stay present, stay calm, and centered.
All right, there is JJ McCarthy on his mindset there. But the best advice that he got, because I asked him about that, he said was just to be you. like just to be himself, was the best advice that he was given. And that makes a lot of sense in running this team. And I think that his authenticity overall is one of the reasons that his teammates have seemed to have galvanized around him already in training camp. And now they get to go see what it's going to be really like. But I also go back to what KOC said, which is you're not alone out there. There's a lot of other talented players on the field that can help support JJ McCarthy in his first game. But you get a window there into what KOC's thinking, what JJ McCarthy is thinking as they go into a couple of days of practice and then get ready to play football. So let's get to some of your answers. That FanDuel question of the day is, what is realistic for JJ McCarthy for a stat line? But if you've got another viewpoint on this that isn't a stat line, that will certainly be accepted. And 220.5 yards is the over-under on FanDuel going into this game. So let's see. Oh, it was, I should give credit where it's due. It was Tristan that said, it'll be nice when he gets his first snap, so we don't have to talk about that anymore. Vegas Patriots says, have faith in KOC setting up JJ for success. This is why last year was a very important season for the Minnesota Vikings. And even another comment that McCarthy made was talking about Sam Darnold and what he saw from him last year, and how Darnold had a balance between taking care of his body and preparing. And that's a small thing that a rookie would not know, of how a quarterback went about his week. Also, I was thinking about he called him Coach Wentz, but Carson Wentz is not that old. He's got to feel like he's about 500 being around JJ McCarthy. But that's why it was also important for them to sign Carson Wentz, for somebody that he could lean on and somebody that he could talk to about playing at Soldier Field, winning at Soldier Field, winning on Monday Night Football. Sam Howell just didn't know anything about winning in the NFL, whereas Carson Wentz has won 40-something games and has led teams to the playoffs and so forth. That type of experience, I think, is really useful around him. But last year meant a lot for us seeing how Kevin O'Connell operated with a quarterback who, while Darnold was much more experienced, had not had much success, and how he went about setting up his quarterback for success. And every time we talk to O'Connell about McCarthy, we just get a little bit more of peeking through the window of why this tends to work for him. And somebody asked me earlier today, like, why is it that, national media seems lower on the Vikings than local media? Did we suddenly all turn into homers? And I would say that, national media, there's so many national media people that I've seen the Vikings be picked as Super Bowl champions. I had national NFL writer Matt Verderam on here from SI, and he said he was picking the Vikings to win the division. That was before the Parsons trade, but I assume that he still is doing that. So it's not like one monolith that has one opinion about the Minnesota Vikings, but there has been, I think, a lot of skepticism. And I think the reason that the locals have been picking double-digit win games and playoff appearances and good seasons from JJ McCarthy is, well, of course, we saw it in practice and we saw how they built on it, but also we covered last year and saw how Sam Darnold thrived. And this is a better offense than it was last year with the way that it's set up in the interior of the offensive line. And I think that it is better in the screen game, which Aaron Jones was talking about. And it is better in the run game. There's no question about those things that can support JJ McCarthy. And I even think that having Adam Thielen has the potential to make them quite a bit more dynamic than they were last year, because they have an underneath option of someone who knows how to read defenses, get into space, and be there for his quarterback. He's been a quarterback's best friend for his entire career, including in Carolina. So I think the circumstances are better, and I think the quarterback is not quite as rawly talented, but maybe a little bit above the shoulders, a little bit more capable of handling certain things than Sam Darnold was. I thought Sam Darnold was a tick late on a lot of stuff and then made up for it with arm talent, where I feel like JJ McCarthy and his timing is very good with the offense, and that matches up a little bit better with Kevin O'Connell than Sam Darnold did. Now, it's going to be very hard to reach that level of a season where you win 14 games and you're a top 10 quarterback in a lot of statistical categories. But I think that there are some assets to his game that just click with what Kevin O'Connell wants. Track Pat says, we need a pie chart of QB ranges for JJ McCarthy in week 1. Okay, let's give it a try. So the 4 categories would have to be, he is unbelievable. He is pretty darn good in wins. He's pretty meh and wins, or it's, well, I don't know about, the winning. Now we have to create like 18 categories. How about just, he's unbelievable. He's really, really darn good. He's pretty meh, or he's pretty bad. I mean, for me, unbelievable is probably I'm going to try this off the dome here because I've been asked for a pie chart. When you get asked for a pie chart, you got to make a pie chart. I will go 10% that it's unbelievable, that it's just 400 yards, 4 touchdowns. It's Peyton Manning right off the bat. There's a 10% chance that happens. It's the Bears, who knows, right? Justin Jefferson plays here, so that could happen. I will say that very good, certainly good enough to win and then some, is 30% chance, 40? I'll go 40. So we're up to 50, and I will say another 30% then goes to pretty meh, but they still could probably win if things go right. So now I'm at 50, 60, 90. 10% is just awful, because I've just seen too much of him practicing to think he's just going to go out there and throw the ball into the stands every time or take 100 sacks. We've seen him in the preseason. So that's where I'm going to go. I'm going to go 10% unbelievable, 10% terrible, and 50% goes to pretty darn good, 30% goes to meh. And I'll get to your guys' answers shortly on your expectations. Of course, LDR Believer has the Vikings winning 63-0 is a very reasonable I did say reasonable expectation. Kurt says this year's team is going to be good at something else that they weren't last year. Hopefully, maybe several things, but finding out what those are is going to be exciting. Yeah, I think we could take a shot at it. I think they have a deeper defense, even if the secondary is similarly thin. The front 7 is quite a bit more talented than it was last year, where they were taping and gluing spots together. And I also think that interior line is just such a difference maker. And KOC, I have the quote here, what he said about Donovan Jackson. He was talking about how Donovan Jackson has been really good at learning. And that's something that you want to hear from young players, that he has been very good when a rep goes wrong of being able to fix it pretty quick. He said, let's see, he might get beat on something like being over aggressive against a veteran player like Jonathan Allen or Javon Hargrave, and a move that they use against him, but he learns how to improve many times, not having to go upstairs and watch the tape. So, I mean, meaning that just from rep to rep, while he's actually out there, he's able to fix and correct things, which I think is a very valuable thing for Donovan Jackson. But even Jackson's athleticism and his ability in the screen, totally unique from where they were last year, where they had no athleticism at left guard. Blake Brandel was filling a spot, admirable, but do you want him running 20 yards down the field on a screen? Like, of course not. And Dalton Reisner, do you want him running 20 yards down the field? Of course not. Whereas, Will Fries is a big dude who can move. So they've changed their dynamic quite a bit on the interior. DL says 254 yards, 1 passing touchdown, 1 rushing, and a 27-13 win. That sounds right there as a reasonable expectation for JJ McCarthy. Couple of touchdowns, decided win. Maybe not a huge blowout. It was, in a game like 27-13, you're probably talking about something that's fairly close throughout certain parts of the game, and then you're just a little bit better to the end. 254 yards, not unreasonable there. Adam says 21-17 Vikes is just get the win. Just get the win, even if it's by a little. That's completely reasonable. Digital Plains Media, have they given any detail about Harrison Smith's absence? They have not. Can confirm that Harrison was in the building today, and he was at walkthrough, according to O'Connell, wasn't going to practice. That's the best we can do. And the whole thing sounds like it was a health matter that he wanted to be private. And when it comes to something like that, and we'll talk to him eventually when he gets back out, and he can give how many ever details he wants to give. But if we're not talking about, this is just my view, if we're not talking about a wrist injury, an ankle, or something like that, and it's more of something that he wants to keep to himself, then I'm going to respect that. I mean, I think every person has had, or in their family or something from a health perspective that you wouldn't necessarily want the whole world to be broadcast. So I think that there is, when it comes to certain things, entitlement to your privacy. So we'll just find out when we find out. But I will say that the update from O'Connell was not super promising. The way that he framed it of, well, he's not going to practice today. We're going to try to ramp him up. Looking at my watch here, there is not that many hours left until they kick the football off on Monday night. So how does that change things? Because if there's one guy who can mind bleep Caleb Williams, it's Harrison Smith, right? He's been messing with quarterbacks for how many years? Coming up to the line of scrimmage, dropping back, making adjustments, checks and changes on the defense. He really is the center of their communication. If they're missing him, it's not that Josh Metellus can't do that stuff, or maybe Theo Jackson. We've at least seen Josh Metellus do this stuff. Theo needs to prove it this year, but it does take away some of the dynamic element of Metellus is up at the line of scrimmage. Now he's somewhere else. And does that mean that someone like Jay Ward has to play a lot in this game, or does it mean that they play a lot of nickel, which is Jeff Okudah, and then we get our first major test of Jeff Okudah? That I could also see where they just play nickel for the entire game if they don't have Harrison Smith and it's Theo Jackson and Josh Metellus. Does that impact the deep passing game? Because I think Metellus is at his best when he is playing up at the line of scrimmage. And I'm not sure how they're going to manage things with Harrison because we didn't see a lot of camp. We just didn't with him. I mean, he was only out there for the first couple weeks, and sometimes they were having Josh Metellus play next to him, and sometimes it was Theo Jackson. So I don't know exactly what the plan was going to be with Harrison Smith, but it may take some time to ramp him back up and be ready to play. They need him. They need him against Chicago. Maybe you get away with that, but it's not like Caleb Williams can't throw the football. It's not like he's incapable of making some plays and some great throws, but especially against Atlanta and Cincinnati, those are two really good offenses, or at least, Atlanta should be. They need him back as soon as they can get him. Kit says for Monday night, 18 for 25, 241 pick, 40 rushing yards, and a rushing touchdown. Very reasonable expectations there. That's a great stat line for him. Complete a lot of passes. It's not crazy yardage, but it's also not total dink and dunk. 40 yards rushing. I definitely think that he can make an impact with his legs right away. And that's probably the biggest surprise I think a lot of people outside of here are going to have, is that JJ McCarthy's going to run. He's going to make plays with his legs. He's not going to just sit in the pocket and wait and take some of the hits that Sam Darnold took. There were a lot of times last year where I thought, Sam, run, move your legs, my man, like get out of there. And then he would run backwards and take a sack. And there were a few really good scrambles. The one in Seattle comes to mind. And I think he was dealing with a bit of an ankle or a leg injury throughout the season. He had to miss a couple plays there. He got hurt against the Jets, got hurt against the Bears at Soldier Field. So that may have limited some of Darnold's rushing ability, but I think McCarthy, that's really in his DNA to be a runner. 40 yards would be very good. Williams says ESPN posted an article anointing Green Bay the class of the NFC and Minnesota misses the playoffs. Well, put that down for about the 25th straight year of things like that. Not saying it's impossible. Green Bay's a good team. I have a ton of respect for their coach, their running game, and now their defense with Micah Parsons. But that seems how it's always going to lean when it comes to preseason prognostications. Is Green Bay gets the benefit of the doubt. For some reason, Chicago gets the benefit of the doubt. Well, Detroit and Minnesota get questioned, and that's what's going to happen going into this season. I still think Detroit's a really darn good team. I still would put Detroit as the strongest roster by ever so slight over the Vikings, but very, very, very close. And I would still have Green Bay behind them because I think it's Micah Parsons and still a bunch of B plus players on that roster. There's not multiple A plus players. It's now Micah Parsons. Welcome to the A plus club, Green Bay Packers. But that race, it's neck and neck and neck. I mean, the gaps are very small. I would say the Vikings are better as a complete team by only a shade. And that's if JJ McCarthy plays well. But Jordan Love, there is a sample on Jordan Love, and there's a lot of evidence on Jared Goff of how good he can be offensively. But I'm not surprised by that because Green Bay has all the hype going into the season now after this big trade. And there probably is. And look, I think that it's great for them and their defense. And the trickle down effect is enormous. So you've heard me talk about this. You've been annoyed at me for talking about this. But one player suddenly making you the favorite, I think would be a little bit too much for me. From going from a lot of the projections of being third to is one defensive player worth 2 more wins or 3 more wins? Probably not. Especially if he has any sort of back issue. And that's with all the credit due to Micah Parsons. But should they have jumped wildly in the betting markets? Should they have jumped wildly in everybody's projections? I would move them up, but not, well, those other teams are just dog meat and it's Green Bay and everybody else. But that does seem to be how they're being treated after this. So I was not very surprised to see that. Matt says, I think my only expectation is that he looks like he's in command of the offense and doesn't get rattled. 175 yards, a touchdown, a pick. I'd probably say that's about what I expected. I like that explanation and that answer to the question. That's why I said it doesn't have to just be stats. It can be something that you perceive, something that you feel watching him. Does it feel like it's in command throughout the last 2 training camps, throughout his couple of preseason appearances, throughout the joint practices? That's the word I would just use over and over for JJ McCarthy. And actually, let me get you what Aaron Jones had to say about McCarthy being a gamer. So I asked him about that.
Given JJ any advice this week heading into his first game week?
Yes, it's the same thing you've been doing since you were a kid. You're a winner. Let's keep it going. But our job is to make your job easier. So let us know how we're going to do our job to make your job easier. But if there's any other way we can help, let us know. But no, he's ready for the moment. I'm excited to be able to go out there with him and get to see him start his first game and lead us.
You talk about him being a winner. Kevin was talking about earlier, just like a gamer element to him. Like, how would you define that? I mean, he hasn't. I think he's lost 1 game since high school or something like that. Like, how would you define that?
So I would define JJ as gamer for sure. He's definitely a gamer. We were playing in a kickball tournament, and just to see him diving for like the balls, and I said, "Oh, this kid's a gamer." Like, when the game's on, he's gonna go out there. He's gonna give that extra effort. He's gonna strain, and he's gonna get the job done. So, like I said, I'm excited for him. We're here to just give him everything he needs, like I said, and be that person in his ear that, hey, if you need to pick me up, we're here to pick you up. Or if you need to tell somebody to tell you good job, we're here to tell you good job as well.
Who else had the thought, JJ McCarthy, don't dive when you're playing kickball? That's a Vikings quarterback injury waiting to happen. But I think you get the point from Aaron Jones that no matter the circumstances, he sees McCarthy as a competitor. And I think that being in command, that comes out. So there's the preparation, there's the competitiveness, there's the big stages he's been on. There's a lot of boxes checked going into this game to say that it won't be too big for him or that he won't be in command or that he gets rattled easy. I did really like what Jeremiah Searles said yesterday, which is offensive line, it's on you to not let JJ McCarthy get hit early in those first couple drives. And there's real data behind that. There was a study a few years ago about how quarterbacks performed after they had just been hit. And did they play differently after a QB hit? Of course, Matthew Stafford did not. and actually somehow played better after a QB hit. But even Tom Brady played a little bit worse after he had taken a hit. So I expect, McCarthy to have toughness for that. But every quarterback gets impacted by pressure. How he starts the game, I think, will make a big difference for how in command we feel like he is throughout the game. Rob says Caleb Williams still doesn't do the routine things routinely. That's another thing we're going to find out right there is, can Caleb Williams do the routine things routinely? Because he most certainly did not last year. Mr. Marauder, realistically, JJ is a second-year guy mentality, but most quarterbacks have rough first seasons because of the mental aspect. I see him being way better than expected because he has been studying the offense for a year. Right. I mean, you and I are thinking along the same lines of something I've said a lot, which is don't call him a rookie. Just don't say that. It's not true. When you get to, it's kind of like having an internship is what it was really like last year for JJ McCarthy. Because a lot of times, if you've ever had an internship or something like that, a job shadow in your life, well, just for example, we got intern Maggie on the show, right? Well, I'm not going to say intern Maggie, why don't you just host the entire show? And I'm going to go sit over there. JJ McCarthy was not hosting the entire show. He was not running the offense. He wasn't out there, but that doesn't mean he wasn't learning the entire time. And I think we saw the fruits of that during this training camp. And I also think that going into that injury, having confidence of what he had done before that made a difference as well in the way that he came out of that injury. Like, oh yeah, this is me. Like the first time that he was out there in practice throwing. Oh yeah, that's right. Where I left off last was pretty darn good practices. Let's see. Dystopian Utopia says, ready for an easy start, rely on the running and defense. Ideally, it would be 17 for 26, 180 yards, no touchdowns or interceptions in a win. Does that win you the game? Does 100? I mean, if Miles Price gets a punt return for touchdown look, touchdown stats, we know how those are. Sam Darnold's touchdown stats were pumped up last year by the fact that they couldn't run. There's no doubt about it. So if they run 3 touchdowns and they win 21-14 and they control the ball and play defense and he throws for 180 yards, I don't think anybody is going to be unhappy with that. I think realistic expectations as far as have a lot of completions, stay on the field a lot, hit a deep shot or two to show off the cannon, and that's all they need from you to win this game potentially. Now, we should mention that Caleb Williams last year did score a lot of points against the Vikings, though a good amount of those were playing from behind, but he does have that in him. I mean, I think we all think this Vikings defense should go in and hold them under 20 points, but this is a very, very talented offense with a lot of weapons and a play caller that's beaten the Vikings before. Like, I don't know if 17 for 26 and 180 yards is going to be able to beat the Chicago Bears. Like, you might need more than that from JJ McCarthy. I think it's a fair, realistic expectation is, hey, just keep the train on the tracks. But I think it's also realistic that if the train goes off the tracks on defense, that you find a way. I mean, that's what Darnold did last year against the Bears. And I think if they need that from McCarthy, then he's got to do it. Because there's a little bit of kid glovesness to the way we talk about it. Like, hey, if he throws for 180, that's probably fine. Play to the score. And I agree with a lot of that. Run the football well. Don't turn it over. All those things can win you a lot of games. But you're a first round pick for a reason. If this gets into a shootout, you're going to have to go do something. And that's where I think we'll learn a lot about McCarthy at some point is, if Cincinnati or Atlanta or, whatever game turns into a shootout, how's that going to look? And it might happen right away. I mean, there's no guarantee that the Vikings just completely shut out Caleb Williams, because even as bad as his first season was, you saw last year that he will have those glitches in the matrix where he makes ridiculous plays, ridiculous throws, scrambles, runs, all that sort of stuff. So it may be realistic, or it may be a realistic expectation that that he will do whatever is required, that he's capable of doing whatever is required. If it's required to go ball out and throw for 320 and 4 touchdowns, then you're going to need that from him. And it's not like he doesn't have enough around him to do it. That seems like a high, lofty expectation. But if the other quarterback, who's a 2024 first round draft pick, if he's balling out, then you need your quarterback to do the same. Whatever it takes to win, I think. Let's see. Mr. Mayor says, I don't deal in realistic. I want him to turn into Tom Brady week 1. I do not blame you for that. Says, will that happen? No, but my cognitive dissonance is stronger than my logic. We're going to make the Bears cry that they picked Caleb. Well, that might be true by the end of the night. That might be true. And that's it's something that is an interesting discussion, though, Mr. Mayor, because I'm sure that because you're talking about 2 years of hype, it's almost like, and I don't want to make this comparison because I think the Vikings will win. I think McCarthy will play well. I think it'll look a lot like last year, week 1 with Darnold. So let me set that aside. But there is a little bit of the Arch Manning Texas thing where the guy gets hyped up so much in everybody's mind that he can't possibly reach those expectations. So you do have to be a little careful of that, I think, as a fan base. There's just been so much expectation from the minute that he's drafted to be the franchise quarterback. And there's so many years. Like, we always talk about Chicago and how funny it is that their only good quarterbacks are like, Eric Kramer and Jay Cutler for a minute there, right? And then you have to go back to the 40s until they're actually good. Okay, but the Vikings quarterback history has a different motif, but a similar idea, which is lots of great quarterback seasons, but never the guy. And this is the guy that was promised. So of course you can't judge him on the first game, but that expectation is going to loom large as he goes into this first game. That's why I use the word realistic, trying to force you to put your realistic hats on, I guess, for just today. And when you get to Monday, you can think and feel however you want in terms of excitement. I'm sure realistic does go out the window, but for the purposes of tonight, realistic for this discussion. Chris says realistic is 22 for 30, 260 yards, a touchdown, rushing TD, and the Vikes win 28-17. I think that's totally fair. Vegas Patriots got him 20 for 29, 243, and a touchdown. I think you guys are barking up the right tree because realistic to me is somewhere in that range of complete 65 to 70% of your passes, hit a couple of explosives, score enough that it's going to be hard for the Bears to match. So 24, 27, meaning the Bears would have to have a good day offensively to keep up with you. And Mr. Marauder pointing out, a win supported by 140 yards on the ground. No, that would be very good for them as well. And that's a realistic expectation, maybe not 140 yards, but that they run successfully. I'm a Carpenter, 16 for 22, 196, touchdown, 32 rush yards. Expose has 220 yards, 2 touchdowns, and a pick. Kurt says just win. Right, but I think if your realistic expectation is you don't care what happens as long as they win, and then I come back with, well, what if they win, 9-6 and McCarthy throws 4 picks? I don't think that's going to feel very good. It's realistic to expect in the 200s for yards, putting up 27 points or so, being in command of the offense. Like, all those things to me are what you're looking for JJ McCarthy, son of Beavers. 185 yards, 1 touchdown, probably a little bit on the low side is for the yardage there for me. Just a little bit on the low side. I think even if you have a lower scoring game, you're still looking to get over 200 with the receivers that you have and so forth. Mr. Marauder said JJ has said that more pressure is better because it clicks in his extreme focus. Well, yeah, I mean, I think that he has the confidence from his background, and that helps. Having the confidence in his background of doing a lot of winning, he walks into this game saying, I've done a lot of winning, right? And I expect to win when I go into these games. Where it will be interesting is if they don't, and then how do you bounce back and how do you deal with that? Because McCarthy hasn't had too much failure in his career, but that could be where the silver lining to last year's injury is. I think you can only really understand how to deal with adversity when you've actually faced adversity before. And JJ, throughout going through that through last season, having to be sidelined and watch, it seems like it was a nightmare. I mean, I'm sure it was. You're ready to go. You're ready to start the season, thinking about when you're going to play, or at least, be available, be on that sideline, be one play away, and then it's taken away from you. Like, that's hard. And so now there might be something different where it's, yeah, there's a lot of pressure here, but it's way better than the alternative, which was last year not being able to play at all. Jay Deasy's got 220 yards, seeming fair as long as he looks the part and doesn't get rattled at the first sign of trouble. And that's, to me, that's why you draft him. That's why you draft JJ McCarthy, is that not rattled part. That the yardage, those things, the completion percentage, Tom's got 66% completion percentage. William 18 for 25. I think you guys are in the right ballpark as far as completion percentage. It's fair to want a 65% completion percentage. And I know that's not a great stat because it could be pumped up by checkdowns and screens, but at the end of the day, not too many successful quarterbacks are completing 57%. For a single game, yes, but having that expectation of being higher and accurate. I mean, so let's go into more detail here. I mean, you guys have had, I think, great stat lines. You're in a similar place with the stat lines. If I were to take the average of all of your rational FanDuel question of the day answers, it would probably end up with something like 17 for 26, 235 yards, 2 touchdowns, maybe an interception, maybe a rushing touchdown. So let's just call that the answer, essentially crowdsourcing what the answer is. But the addition to that is command of the offense, not getting rattled on the national stage for sure. And for me, throwing the ball accurately with consistency. I'm sure that the first throw that goes over somebody's head or is thrown in the dirt, that there will be some folks who are like, that accuracy is a problem. But how many of those are there? There will be a couple. There is a couple for every single quarterback. How many of those are there? Because the crazy part about the NFL is that the difference between completing 68% of your passes, or just call it 70, and 57% of your passes is only a couple of games. Think about that, over 100. It's 13 over 100. That's 3 games worth. That's 4 passes a game. 4 passes a game separates Kyle Bowler from Drew Brees. That's nuts. So what does it look like accuracy-wise for JJ McCarthy? Does it look like there's too many of those balls that aren't accurate? Or does it look like his improvement has been massive since he first got here, and then off you go into the future? That's a big question. Matt says, I do get a little nervous playing the Bears early. Johnson seems like a guy who is going to have some new wrinkles and some success for the first month, so before his team gets sick of him. Yeah, that's true. And plan is tomorrow to record with Courtney Cronin, covers the Bears for ESPN, also national radio and talk host. So I'm excited to talk with her tomorrow afternoon, and then we'll play that conversation tomorrow night. That is the plan as of right now. And I am really interested to hear about this crazy preseason and training camp and the relationship there. But you make a good point that Ben Johnson was in the lab cooking up all the different things that he's seen from Brian Flores' defense and how Flores is going to try to counter and how he's going to try to manipulate those things. This guy's ready. And even if he does turn out to be a total psycho and loses the team halfway through the season and Caleb isn't any good anymore, this first week, that guy is bringing every single thing to the table that he's ever thought of. And, I didn't really think of that angle. I've just thought, Ben Johnson has been good against the Vikings, and that's something you have to worry about. But you make a very valid point of playing them in their first week where they haven't run into any issues yet where he's throwing a chair at a left guard or something. And I mean, that's what it sounded like in training camp. It just sounded like he was a Will Ferrell character out there. But if they haven't faced any issues yet, and he's taught them this game plan that he's got ready against Flores, that's probably the best that they're going to be unless he turns out to be a really good coach and Caleb turns out to be a really good quarterback. So I think that your nervousness is rational there, that he is the wild card. I think we have a good sense, I think at least, that we have a good sense for Caleb Williams' strengths and weaknesses. It's Ben Johnson and whether he can mitigate those and whether he can highlight the strengths and whether he can get him to play on time that's going to make the difference here. But I think that you want to talk about pressure. Both these quarterbacks are facing pressure. I think Williams, though, is facing more even than J.J. McCarthy because the entire narrative of the season is going to be set in this first week. If Caleb Williams goes, 9 for 23 with 5 sacks and Chicago loses 23-7, that place is going to explode. I mean, it's going to be pitchforks going to the Soldier Field from everybody who expected Caleb Williams to be great and Ben Johnson to be the answer. And, the national TV conversation will be nothing about the Vikings or JJ McCarthy. It'll be entirely about Caleb Williams' failures. I mean, that's the best case scenario for the Vikings because not only would you walk out there 1-0, but you would also walk out of there sort of having dropped a bomb on Chicago because they are going to be in full panic mode after 1 week. And then you're already putting Ben Johnson in a position to prove that he can handle it, which other coaches, as you saw from Matt Eberflus, not exactly so great at handling it. Jonathan says the RBs and tight ends will be the first stages in his ease to comfortability with the passing game. I totally agree, Jonathan. And that's where I think, I was thinking about this today about, bringing back Aaron Jones and how we evaluate certain moves, right? So what we often do with different moves is we do them with no context in a total vacuum. And we just go, was it worth the money versus the player and his statistics and his age and things like that? That's how we always do it. We go, all right, this player was paid X number of dollars. Here's his cap hit. Here's his money. Here's his stats. Opinion, right? But with someone like Aaron Jones, I think you have to blur the lines there and really get into the nitty gritty with how important he is. The screen game, the passing game. They hit downfield a couple of times. The leadership, somebody who's been through absolutely everything, but also, when you talk to people about Aaron Jones, the positive force, and you just get it from him, the positive force that guy is in a huddle at all times, the calm force that guy is at all times. And I think that means a lot to JJ McCarthy and Hockenson as well. Like, these guys are your security blankets, use them. And the same thing goes for having Adam Thielen. And that's where, when you talk about just how well you can set up somebody and the quarterback whisper, well, it's a loud whisper because it's not just one guy who's whispering to JJ McCarthy. It's an entire huddle. I mean, Donovan Jackson is the only guy who is younger than JJ McCarthy, the only guy who hasn't been through things in the league, the only guy who hasn't had success in the league. Everybody else has in that entire huddle. How rare is that? How many teams can say that where every single guy in that huddle has either been on winning teams or had success with their, in like Indianapolis's case? I know Will Fries, I don't know if I don't think he had any playoff wins in Indianapolis, but developed there alongside Ryan Kelly and has had successful seasons in the NFL. Hawkinson's been to the Pro Bowl. Jefferson's the best receiver in the league. Thielen's been to the Pro Bowl and been in the playoffs and made game-winning plays in the playoffs. Jones has won in the playoffs. I mean, there's just a lot there. There is a lot there to work with. Let's see. Brad says, why not Carson Wentz from the start? Why trade for Howell? Initially leveraged some draft capital poorly. I mean, not really. They moved down a couple of spots on day 3 for Sam Howell. That's not leveraging draft capital. Let's be serious. I mean, your odds, what did they move down? Like 20 spots or something? I mean, your odds are 0% different for moving down. Seattle, and now we see why. Seattle wanted to get rid of Sam Howell, and they did for nothing. So they did not leverage draft capital there. Let's not overdo it. But as far as why not Wentz from the start, I don't know this. My guess is that Carson Wentz didn't really want to go through all of training camp. That's just a guess. Or that they told Carson Wentz, why don't you just hang out? Like, we're interested, but if Sam Howell's great, we're going to go that direction and you can sign with someone else. There were probably 5 teams that wanted Carson Wentz that did not have very good backup situations. And I know Son of Beavers guy, CJ Beathard, just signed today. So that dream has unfortunately died for you, my friend. But like, that's who's out there at this point. There were other teams that could have used Carson Wentz. I wonder if there was always kind of a, like wink, wink, nod, nod. We'll give you a call if it doesn't work out. And then that phone call and I'm just only speculating here. This could be completely wrong, but Carson Wentz is a tremendous backup quarterback that a lot of teams could have used. I've got to think that halfway through training camp, they had a pretty darn good idea. This is not working with Sam Howell. Because, I mean, what date did I declare it over with Sam Howell? I mean, it must have been 3 weeks in, 2 weeks in. And I remember just even wondering to myself, like, am I being too hard on Sam Howell? And the answer was no, I'm not. This looked a lot like Kellen Mond. It was not very good. Jay Deasy says the Homer Michael Wilbon said on ESPN Chicago. Hey, I was on that station. No, I was on the Score. I was on the Score earlier this week. Said that the Bears defense will embarrass McCarthy and that JJ just rode the run game. Well, maybe. That's always possible. I look at the Bears defense as having some dudes and having a very good defensive coordinator. This should be mentioned is that their defense does not have superstars. Sweat is as close as it gets if Jalen Johnson isn't playing. Johnson is very good, but they do have a star defensive coordinator in Dennis Allen. He has been really good for a long time. Not a great head coach. He was set up to fail in New Orleans, but somebody who has over the years put together a lot of very good schemes. And this is not going to be something you just roll the ball out and beat the Chicago Bears. They've got enough talent and they have a really good DC. And I think that, this is a really good matchup. I don't think that Chicago is a 10-win football team, but this is certainly not like going out there and playing the Cleveland Browns in week 1 or the Tennessee Titans. This is playing a real football team now, I think. Talent-wise, coaching-wise, from an offensive schematic standpoint, who knows about the leadership, but from a schematic standpoint, offense and defense, there are a lot of weeks where the Vikings walk in with a huge edge schematically. I don't know if this is a huge edge. I think this is closer to even between Ben Johnson and Dennis Allen and Brian Flores and Kevin O'Connell. I think it's a little bit closer. But, you're right. Wilbon's a Chicago guy. He's going to say that. I was thinking about this a lot because this is how you get on TV, right? This is what I've been doing wrong. This is how you get on TV. You just make this declarative statement about what's going to happen like you're totally sure. And then when it doesn't happen, you're like, well, I'll do it again. I'll do it again tomorrow. I guess we really should make up a segment where I do that, where I just go through the games and have the most ridiculously confident. We should do that. We should do that. Just have this absurdly confident guys. The Dallas Cowboys are so motivated by losing Micah Parsons. They will win this game by double digits. Philadelphia's got the Super Bowl hangover. They are done as a great team in the NFL on Thursday night. Is that my tryout? Did I get the job? I have trouble doing that because I don't know who's going to win or how it's going to go. So we try to think of all the different factors and outcomes and what could impact it and everything else. But that takes longer. That's why we have 2-hour, 3-hour live streams. It just takes too long. I can't do the 30-second bite so good. Expose says, why do not enough people talk about JJ as the quarterback KOC picked? They talk about him as quarterback whisperer, but then doubt the person that he handpicks based on the lack of throwing in a Michigan offense. It's because they've got no information to work with. That's really what it is. Also that people plant flags on quarterbacks. It's kind of like I was just saying, you can do this. You can make a 30-second soundbite. Any of you could do it on any quarterback in the NFL. You just take a quarterback out of a hat and you come up with 30 or 45 seconds of just the most boilerplate type of stuff on that person, but you say it loudly and you say it confidently and you're good. That's a lot of times that's analysis. That's what passes for analysis. And, like, look, there's not unlimited time like there is on the live stream on television, but I just see a lot of that. Like, give me any quarterback, Trevor Lawrence. This guy was supposed to be a generational talent. And then it's like a little adventure tree. You give a little bit about his bio. He was supposed to be a generational talent, and you either go left with, I still believe that's in there, or you go right with, he has proven that he's not. And then you take it from there. And then you give a little tiny bit of evidence and you say it really strongly, and then you go forward. Get used to it, guys, because JJ McCarthy is going to be at the center of this all year long. Every game, there will be, especially the start of the season, the island games, they're going to get broken down like this. It's going to be either you see JJ McCarthy can game manage his way because he had a very average game, but it shows you how good the Vikings are. Or if they lose, then it's going to be, you see, he didn't throw enough passes in college. Like, I don't know. It's just how it works. It's relevant that he hasn't thrown a lot of passes. It matters that he hasn't when it comes to some of the details, the accuracy, the speed of the game. The littlest thing can make a difference between whether you hit a guy between the hands or whether you overthrow him by 6 inches. Like, that's football. That's what makes it so great. So it does matter that he hasn't racked up 4,000 throws and that he's still a guy who is learning to develop on the fly in his first game. But that doesn't mean he can't succeed in this offense. And yeah, it is true that, they picked him. They only picked him out of 2 potential quarterbacks. It was like him or Bo Nix, and they picked him. They could have moved up, I guess, but those top 3 were really locked in. The 2024 draft's going to be talked about forever, though. That is going to be super interesting, and that's what Kaylor and I are getting together tomorrow to do our podcast on the 2024 draft class and talking about, the Vikings face a lot of them this year. So we're going to have a good discussion about that. Couldn't get together today. So someone was painting her apartment or something. The life of a podcaster, my friends. But my point is that when you have a quarterback on a relevant team with the coach of the year that just won 14, that is a first-round draft pick, you are going to be at the center of what my friends on the Check the Mic podcast called the Shouty Shows. You're going to be in the middle of that. And welcome to relevancy. That's how I look at it. Welcome. If you're relevant, then people are screaming about your quarterback on TV. I'm not great at that. But although, maybe I just created a formula for myself with the Trevor Lawrence thing. But I'm generally not great at that. But you're going to see a lot of it. That's for sure. Let's see. Matt says Okudah gets a pick 6 and gives a shout out to Rob E. Hey, Rob has been in the comments since they signed Okudah as an Okudah guy. We won't mention all the other guys that Rob also liked during the offseason, but nailed the Jeff Okudah one. I appreciate you, Rob, always being here for those shows. But he was the first. Rob was absolutely the first that was saying, hey, Mekhi Blackmon might not be that dude. Turned out that there was something wrong there. I haven't seen if he's talked in Indianapolis. I was kind of curious, actually, that if he talked at all to the Indianapolis media. I'm going to have to see if somebody sees that. Let me know if there were some quotes from Mekhi Blackmon about, coming to Indianapolis and what happened. Mr. Mayor says, how many 40-plus point games this year? I mean, if you're betting, you'd probably say 0. It's hard to get to a 40-point game. Maybe 1 if something goes really right. John says 20-16 score. That FanDuel question of the day of just your reasonable expectations for JJ McCarthy for week 1. Reasonable stat line, reasonable what it looks like. Frost Gia? I'm sorry, I'm just going to call you Frost. I expect heavy nickel and 0 blitzes when they can. I want to see what Dennis Allen has cooked up. Is he historically a guy who does that, or is that more of a thing because they did it against the Rams? And 0 blitzes, right? Pressure right away. Like just pressure right away. Nick says, what about Hawkinson? More concerned with him not practicing in a month. Why? Hawkinson? Oh, Hawkinson's been practicing. He's been out there. Yeah, TJ has been, I don't think he missed any time during this offseason. I think that TJ Hawkinson, now here's the thing about like when it comes to like the target share, every single person's not going to match expectations. So we may get to a point in the season where you go, well, I expected more catches from Hawkinson, but you just can't have everybody maximize it unless you throw 800 passes. You're not going to have everybody. You're not going to have Thielen get 50 and Naylor have a breakout year and Addison come back and look like a star and Jefferson get his usual and Hawkinson make the pro. It's not possible. There's just not enough human beings to hawk a pigskin at. But I do think that the chemistry between Hawkinson and McCarthy was really good during the summer. And that's where I expect us to see him early on leaning on TJ Hawkinson quite a bit. This is a game where you could see the Bears trying to play over the top of Justin Jefferson. And also the update on Jalen Johnson didn't look great. I saved something that Will Raggett said earlier about Nashawn Wright. Do you guys remember Nashawn Wright? If you remember Nashawn Wright, you're a real one. Let's see. Dan Wiederer, who covers the Bears, said Jalen Johnson's availability for Monday night remains in question. If he can't play or is limited, Nashawn Wright is eager for his chance. Nashawn Wright, he was with the Vikings, and I don't believe ever played. Maybe played in a game. Maybe he appeared in a single game. I guess I'll have to look that up if he played in any games. Nashawn Wright has kind of been a bit of a journeyman. He played a little bit for Dallas. That's the guy that's going to fill in. That does not sound all that promising for Chicago. How do you spell his name? I'm looking up how many snaps Nashawn Wright has ever had in his career. It is N-A-H. For those at home looking up, 6'4" guy. He's played 484 snaps. Oh, in 2024, he did play 86 total defensive snaps. I'm going to tell you the truth. Oh, no, wait, that was the preseason. Never mind. I was like, man, I don't remember a single one of those snaps. Regular season, he has played 272 snaps, did not get on the field for the Minnesota Vikings, did not have good PFF coverage grades. Yeah. Has allowed 68% completion percentage into his coverage, does have one career interception. That might change all of the expectations if Jalen Johnson, that is not a regular drop-off. You guys are concerned about the Vikings going from, Isaiah Rodgers to Jeff Okudah or something. They're going to go to a guy who's been on 3 teams in the last year if they lose Jalen Johnson. Mo says, is Addison as good as Vikings version of Diggs? I don't think so. Diggs is special. I mean, Diggs was one of the best route runners in the league, elite wide receiver at his best. I don't think Addison is quite on his level because Diggs was a true number one. He proved it in Buffalo that the Vikings really had 2 true number ones in Thielen and Diggs, and that's why quarterbacks were always so good, including Case Keenum with that group and Sam Bradford and Kirk Cousins and so forth. I don't think Addison's quite on that level as a complete wide receiver, where Diggs' contact at the line of scrimmage didn't do a whole lot for him because he was so lightning quick, so technically detailed. But I think Addison's on his way to being a number 2 that makes up one of the best duos in the NFL. The best duo is probably going to be Jamar Chase and T. Higgins. But when Addison comes back, he had a great camp and he's still growing as a player. But Diggs is a high bar to try to reach for Jordan Addison. But he did have a very, very good training camp, and that matters. Mr. Marauder said Thielen is going to be a bear killer underneath. Yeah, I think that's very reasonable because if they're playing Nashawn Wright at corner, they're playing a million miles back. There's no way that they're playing as aggressively if that's who's playing cornerback. Maybe they do want to force JJ to prove it by having some one-on-ones, but I don't know. They still know that number 19 is out there. Williams says he's yet to take a snap, but I think that his comfort with the Vikings offense is way better than other quarterbacks making their first start. No doubt about it, man. No doubt about it that when you have had an entire year working with O'Connell and McCown and a lot of these players and have been in the meetings and have done all those things and had a year to develop. I mean, he started throwing in January. We are 9 months later from then. So it's not a situation where he just got healthy last week. I mean, he's had an entire off season. He had the workouts, the OTAs, the mini camp, all that sort of stuff. It is not like when you say first career start, you usually think rookie. This is not like that. I totally agree with you. Marauder says, do the Bears keep Jets doubled, or do they believe the national media and blitz JJ like he hasn't been practicing against Flores all summer? Hey, that's a good point. That is a good point. Let me pull this up real quick. I'm curious about Dennis Allen was coaching the Saints last year. Last year feels like 7 gazillion years ago. But let's just take a look at how much they blitzed. I'm going to pull this up. Because, of course, the Vikings were, I'm going to use Pro Football Reference again for those playing along at home. How much did they blitz? The New Orleans Saints. Doesn't look like they blitzed a lot, 20%. Only 20% of snaps. So does that, I mean, are they going to be an insane blitzing team? Probably not, based on that. I don't know that they've ever been an insane blitzing team, the New Orleans Saints. Dennis says JJ's number in his 3 high school seasons was 7,905 yards, 94 touchdowns, 13 picks. He doesn't need to pass with the Michigan offense. Yeah, look, I mean, no one's high school stats matter at this point. Michigan stats don't matter at this point. They didn't matter that much then. And I had Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah on the show after they drafted McCarthy. And one of the parts of that discussion was about how my struggle with JJ McCarthy as an analytics enjoyer and as a study of data in the NFL was that he just didn't have much. And what Kwesi talked about them doing was trying to go through and identifying NFL throws or NFL situations and then evaluating them off of this very small sample. Even his college numbers haven't meant that much. And everyone should have insane high school numbers if you're a top 10 overall draft pick. If you didn't, that would be really terrible. He can throw the ball. Throwing the ball at the NFL level is a different thing than anywhere else, though, for sure. But somebody like him has the arm, and he's got the players around him, and he's got the offense to do it. He's just got to be accurate, and he's got to be on time. And that timing is just, it can be ever so slight. Is the difference between having amazing accuracy and bad accuracy. That's the biggest question for me, is just how accurate is he going to be? And War Eagle, bringing up that Kyle Shanahan was a quarterback whisperer until he had Trey Lance. This isn't Trey Lance, and I can speak to that because I saw Trey Lance practice, and it was horrible. It was against the Vikings in 2022. It was brutal. I remember walking away from that thinking, well, the Vikings defense must be great, right? And the Vikings defense was horrendous that year, one of the worst in the league. And Trey Lance, because he just didn't get rid of the ball. He just wouldn't throw it. He couldn't see where it was supposed to go. He was hanging in the pocket too long. Like these are the things for McCarthy that I like so much, is the ball comes out. He seems to know where it's going. He seems he's in control. He seems he's confident. All those things. Anthony's got realistic for FanDuel question of the day. What's realistic for a stat line or how he looks as 285, 3 touchdowns, no picks, and 31 points. To me, that's a little high on the realistic side. That to me is going past realistic and into extremely optimistic. That's like a Brett Favre game you just described right there. 285, 3 picks. I mean, what's your quarterback rating if you throw for 285, 3 picks, and 31 points? I guess it depends on your completion percentage, but that would be a great game if he played that way. Expose said, is there something to the amount of 1-score games the Vikings have won in the KOC era? Even the year Kirk got hurt with a starting QB, they likely win those, right? Because they lost 4 1-score games with either Dobbs or Nick Mullins. I did something on this a couple years ago. There was a great analytical article by 538 because I saw this came up. Barnwell wrote about it for the Vikings and why he thinks they're going to miss the playoffs is that they've won a lot of 1-score games. I think that those 1-score games have become a lot of games in the NFL. The amount of 1-score games has increased and increased and increased almost every year. So it's something where you have to know how to win them, or you're just not going to make the playoffs. I also don't think that all one-score games are created equal. So I looked this up, and Tom Brady was 91-43 in games separated by 7 points or less. If they were all equal, then I don't think Tom Brady's win percentage would be like 70% when he was in a one-score game, right? And why was that? Because Tom Brady was ahead a lot, and then the other team would score at the end of the game, make it a 7-point game. It goes down in the stat sheet that way. But 538 did this really cool thing about the win probability. So how often did your team go into the fourth quarter with a 60 or 70% chance to win? And that's not really a true one-score game. If you go into the fourth quarter with a 70% chance to win and you win by one score, you dominated that football game. And we've gone through this on a micro level throughout the years, where the 2 Packers games last year, the Vikings smashed the Packers in those games. I think everybody walked out saying, they let them hang around, but they outplayed them massively. But they were one-score games. Is that going to regress? To me, those aren't true one-score games. I think in true one-score games, I would describe that as Arizona last year. Probably an even game, maybe even should have lost, maybe got a shade outplayed, and they found a way to win at the very end. It was really tight. That's a true one-score game where each team has 50% chance going into the fourth quarter, and then it's a little bit of whatever way the ball bounces. So those types of things cannot be evaluated in a vacuum. I think it's a team-by-team basis where, how about this? If you look at Kansas City last year and they win with a blocked field goal, they win with Isaiah Likely's heel out of bounds on the first night of the season. There were a lot of those. It was a pass interference on the last play. There were a lot of those that were lucky. And at the end of the day, at the end of the season, it turned out that, that sort of showed up for them, that they couldn't just win every single game that way. Now they got to the Super Bowl though, and that's, I guess, maybe another part of the argument. Like, just because you won one-score games doesn't mean that you can't ever win them again. Like, it's not something that's just guaranteed to regress. And where O'Connell plays into this, and Jefferson, late game play calling, confidence of his quarterbacks, how to use Jefferson in those big spots, it's pretty clear that he's good at this. And we've seen it. And so when you look at some broad statistic, and I think I was talking about this with Anthony Barr, it's like you could look at Barr's PFF grade, but we know more. We can talk to Mike Zimmer about it and find out more about this. And when it comes to this, you can like zoom in a little on these games. If we go to, and look, it's a different team, by the way. It's a very different team. Why would something have to be guaranteed regression when the team is so different? I don't know. Maybe they won't play in one-score games and they'll just win by a lot. But it's a weird thing when the quarterback is different. The defense is revamped. The running game is like, so much is different. And it's just this automatic, one-score games means regression. I just don't agree with that statistical analysis. When now winning all of your one-score games would be hard to do again. Is unlikely because you play a lot of good quarterbacks. Of course it is. And 14 wins is not going to happen. But when we look at some of the one-score games and how much they outplayed some of these teams by, I don't know. Like, they were way up on the Jets. They were way up on the Packers. They were way up on the 49ers. Teams come back at the end. They outplayed Chicago and had 450 yards of offense. They had to come back in Seattle. That was a true one-score game. They barely survived Green Bay last year, but that was not. It's just a little bit of a thing for me that's been interesting to look closer into over the last few years that they've succeeded in them. But I think that we've watched enough of these games to see that a lot of the one-score games are because KOC wasn't putting people away. That was a major part of it, because they couldn't score in the red zone to put a team away, or because they were too aggressive and had 3 and outs and didn't run the clock down when they should have. And the other part of it is when they've needed clutch drives from their quarterbacks, they've often gotten them unless it was Josh Dobbs or Nick Mullins. So I don't know. Yeah, I love talking about stuff like that because I'm so interested in it. But I don't think you could just say, one-score games equals you're suddenly going from 14 to 7 wins. That I think is a little much. But, R. Emmer says, does McCarthy's playing in his hometown add to his nerves, a pro or a con? I can't tell you. I honestly have no idea. I would think that you could make an argument that he's got a lot of people there for him, so he's going to feel pretty good about that. You could argue that it's the stadium he first went to when he was 4 years old. Shout out to Chip Scoggins for that article. And that, that's real, so cool. There's a lot of pressure. His hometown. I don't know. In the NFL, like, you got to be able to just block that stuff out. You just have to. If you can't, then you're going to be in a lot of trouble. He should be okay with that. I don't think that's going to make a lot of difference. Dobbs was at his best when he had no idea what he was doing. Yeah, no, that's completely true. But also, maybe there was a bit. I don't know. He was Josh Dobbs. He's 3-12 for his career. They did the best they could. They should have won the Bears game. The Bears game and then the Broncos game. They should have won those games with Josh Dobbs starting. But that is years in the past. Reconnected says, my expectation for McCarthy is no delay of game calls. Do not have that on FanDuel. Can't make that prop of no delay of game calls. Speaking of which, we got the Purple Insider Fantasy Show coming up here in not too long. I have a ton of questions. I know, you guys, I get behind because you come up with interesting stuff and then I go off on tangents about TV people and so forth, and then I end up behind on your questions. I'm working on it, but later on in the evening, say 9 o'clock, we'll have the fantasy show with Mike Shope where we take props from the best 4 games of the weekend, or four games that I'm really interested in from the weekend, and talk through them, including Vikings and Bears props. So that's a really good discussion that's coming up a little bit later. Speaking of props, Jake says put $50 on Grenard for Defensive Player of the Year. It's not a bad bet. If he's probably got to lead the league in sacks, though. He's been double digits. He would have to have an explosion sack season, and they have to have an elite defense for him to win Defensive Player of the Year. But I don't think that's crazy. I don't think that's insane. It's probably a good bet at, really good odds. Sean says McCarthy getting the call, huddling up to the line of scrimmage with plenty of time to run motions, having him or Kelly change the play. No procedural penalties. Yeah, I mean, look, that did drive me crazy last year. No, I think what you're talking about there is, if you can do that, if you can do all those things you just described, you're probably going to succeed. If you can get the call in, if you can get the huddle lined up, if you can get all the motions and everything. He was able to do it at home. Now he's got to go on the road, and that place is nuts. That place is spooky at night. It's scary. I don't know if you guys have been there. When you walk around that place at night, it's like, this is creepy. It's, you would expect it to be October all the time. It's got quite an atmosphere at Soldier Field when those people are amped up. So it's not going to be as easy as it was for the preseason game for all the procedural stuff, but I do think that helped. Evan says, what's your gut feeling going in? My feeling is that the Vikings will win the game, that it will not be a game where we walk out of saying, oh my gosh, that was Peyton Manning, but it will be the game that we all kind of expect, which is that McCarthy does enough and there's a few exciting plays and it's a little bit gnarly and there's some strange moments, and that they just survive the Bears because they're a little more talented. 23-17. I haven't worked it out yet with the score, but that's my gut feeling. My gut feeling is that he's going to be okay, and that he's not going to freak out in the bright lights or anything like that, and that the offense is going to move, but it's not going to go for 500 yards. And that's not a very hot take, but that is my gut feeling, is that it will be not the most memorable game that we ever have with JJ McCarthy, but it will be something that says, okay, yeah, he can do this. And on to Atlanta and another national TV game, right? War Eagle says, none of it matters. Tebow played on the biggest stages. Josh Allen played nowhere. Talent above all else. Yeah, I don't think that it's like that, because Tim Tebow couldn't throw the football. And Josh Allen needed 3 years until he was good. So, like, there's context for every single person. You can't say that having won the national championship and been on that stage means nothing to this day in Chicago. It does, that experience is banked for JJ McCarthy. It means something. It doesn't mean he's going to win the game. It doesn't mean he's going to play amazing, but at least you've got something there to lean on that you've played in a big situation before. And I don't think that he's going to, freak out in this type of situation where, maybe if he didn't have that experience, maybe he would have, or at least been a little bit more overwhelmed. Chevy Chase. Great to see you, Chevy Chase. I didn't know you were a Vikings fan. Says Dallas Turner is going to go off 2 times better than last year. Kwesi will be smiling by week 10. Yeah, I had a conversation with Dallas today. I'm going to write about it over at the newsletter, purpleinsider.football, my friends, where, I just asked Dallas about like how different are you? And the answer was like immensely different. That's paraphrasing what he said, but there's just so much more that he knows, so much bigger than he was last year in terms of body wise. And I mean, Kevin O'Connell was talking today very confidently about Dallas Turner. And he said, like, I've been telling you guys all offseason about Dallas Turner. And so his expectations seem extremely high. I think they're also trying to get Turner's confidence up because he's going to play. We are going to find out a lot about Dallas Turner, maybe not in week 1, but certainly as we go along about how he fits in and how much of a difference he can make. And I think that if he plays, and this is, I'm going to put aside because it's not fair to the person, Dallas Turner. He didn't trade up for himself. If he plays 500 to 600 snaps, has 6.5 to 7.5 sacks, handful of plays in coverage. I don't know. Picks are hard to figure out. Handful of plays in coverage, handful of tackles for loss. And he adds this dynamic to the defense that makes them scarier. Then he's done a great job with year 2. And then maybe year 3, you're talking about, is he the successor eventually to Andrew Van Ginkel? Van Ginkel's still going to be here. They want to keep this together. But that to me is a reasonable expectation for Dallas Turner. And he's somebody that could take this defense from being like, we think it's going to be good, but if he shines, then it's going to be really good. And it's going to be really scary for the front 7 and for the blocking of the other team. So you're going to have to ask Son of Beavers what Son of Beavers is. I imagine like the people listening on the podcast feed to the live shows are like, who is this Beavers guy, man? He's everywhere. But Beavers is one of the OGs of the live stream. So we appreciate that. But I guess I did maybe throw that out there with no context whatsoever. Jay Deasy says, I think that Colston Loveland, Cole Kmet will be targeted a lot like Sam Laporta was in Ben Johnson's offenses. I think it's a great observation. And from the other side of this, I mean, we've talked about the reasonable expectations for McCarthy, but the other side of this is definitely how aggressive Chicago's going to be from the outset. Like, are they going to try to get the ball to their tight ends? Are they going to try to have long drives and possessions, or are they going to come out and be aggressive and try to go downfield? Carter says, I need Matt sitting across from Stephen A. Courtney's done it. She's going to be on the show tomorrow. I'll have to ask her how that goes exactly. It's never really been my thing. Never really been my thing. I had to get used to being in front of the microphone. Actually, I went to college really to be a writer, and I still do over at purpleinsider.football, my friends. But, I had to get used to, because I got an internship at a radio station and then got hired into radio and just went from wherever it took me. But it took a while to kind of get used to having takes on stuff, because when you're a writer, usually you're a little bit more on the side of playing a little safer. Whereas when you're in front of the microphone, you want to turn up the heat. And then I think I went too far the other way and started turning up the heat too much. And, I've sort of found my place in this world. I mean, that's really what you try to do no matter what. Like, this is the right spot for me, covering this team right here, right now, excited for Monday Night Football. That's my thing. I'm not the person who is going to scream into the TV. I also have to wear this hat everywhere because I don't feel comfortable without the hat. So, I'm not that person that they're going to put on television. Hey, by the way, I want to remind you guys that the show here is brought to you by ZipRecruiter, our friends at ZipRecruiter. I know that a lot of you guys are in management positions. And hey, can I tie this in? Like, if you're looking for a great fit for your television station, you want to use ZipRecruiter to find the hot take artist you're looking for. But, or if you run any other business and you're in a management position, you want to use ZipRecruiter because it is hard to find candidates for your hiring process. You get a lot of people who apply, but maybe aren't qualified, and then they bury the good candidates. It's not great. So you should check out ZipRecruiter by going to ziprecruiter.com/audio, AUDIO. It is that easy. You can use the invite to apply button if you want great candidates that you've already identified, or you can also use their smart technology that will identify candidates for you. So ditch the other hiring sites. Let ZipRecruiter find what you are looking for. That needle in a haystack, great employee. 4 out of 5 employers who post on ZipRecruiter get a quality candidate within the first day. So again, try that for free. ZipRecruiter.com/audio, the smartest way to hire. All right, back to your thoughts. AJ says nobody is worried about Theo Jackson. Well, that's an interesting one because I was on earlier CCO radio with Chad Hartman, good friend of mine, and he asked me he said, what player is nobody talking about that you think is going to be important? Not great, but important. And I said Theo Jackson. And what I said was he's been more of a concept than an actual person. Like, he's this ball hawking guy who in practice gets a bunch of interceptions and then comes into a couple games and gets interceptions. And we like, who is this guy? Why isn't he playing all the time? And he's just been behind this guy or the other guy, Cam Bynum, over the last couple years. And suddenly, he's thrust into this position where if Harrison Smith is out, then Theo Jackson is going to have to play. And I think that if you've seen the practices and you've listened to people talk about Theo Jackson, you probably have more confidence than is justified by his very few number of snaps. I mean, let me look here. How many snaps does Theo Jackson have in his career? It can't be more than 100 or so. Theo has 221 career snaps for the Vikings. 125 came in 2023, 78 last year, but of course, really good in that 78. And he's got a couple interceptions, got a couple other pass breakups last year. He's been good when he's been called upon, but this is a guy with 200 snaps in his career. And that's something where when you have a lot of confidence in the defense, I think that's right to have a lot of confidence in the defense. But in this specific matchup, Theo Jackson, Isaiah Rodgers, Jeff Okudah, you might be talking about a lot of guys that are not as experienced as you would like in these positions. You might be talking about a lot of guys where you can, if you're the Bears, look to take advantage of that lack of experience of actually playing from someone like Theo Jackson. Now, Isaiah Rodgers has played a lot, but he hasn't played a full season. So, I mean, are you worried about him? I haven't been really super worried about him because that position tends to work out. That position has tended to be something that the Vikings could develop. And I don't think they move on from Cam Bynum. They were willing to spend this offseason. I don't think they move on from Cam Bynum unless they really believed in Theo. But what's going to be tested here is that, Brian Flores and his ability to identify players, some of whom have not been starters before, and take the risk to go out on that limb and say, no, I believe in Theo Jackson. I believe in Isaiah Rodgers. I believe in Jeff Okudah, despite not having the great sample size. That's really going to be tested by a lot of good offenses this year. Jay says the biggest concern for the Vikings, it's probably what I saw at Soldier Field from Caleb Williams last year. What I saw was the Vikings pressured him all day and he just did crazy stuff. And I said after the game, I was having, I think, dinner with Dane and Courtney or something after the game, and I said to them, are the Vikings in for the next 10 years of chasing around this guy? And then, of course, he melted down in the second half of the season. But, he played really well in that game against the Vikings. And knowing that that's in there, that you can win up front and you can get in the backfield and you can pressure and everything else, and then he can still make something happen, And that's a big concern. And it's probably Ben Johnson. It's probably that he has had enough success against Brian Flores. I know it's a different team. I know it's a different O-line. It's a way different quarterback. But if you're talking about concerns headed into a football game, that's probably the one that I would put pretty close to the top. Jay says, I think if both O-line and D-line play well, and JJ plays well, then we win. Yeah, I mean, yeah, if they win the trenches battle, they've got a great chance of winning. Yep. Sloth says, did you see the clip of O'Neal telling JJ to off to the side to fire up the huddle? Perfect leadership from both guys. Yep, I did. Yes, I did. And that's what, when KOC talks about you don't have to do it alone, and these guys talk about, hey man, you don't have to do it alone. That's exactly what they're getting at. You don't have to do it alone. He doesn't, I mean, Aaron Jones is a guy who is probably one of the best, not probably, hands down one of the best leaders I've ever been around in my life. I mean, just endless energy, endless positivity, tough as heck, smart as heck, like somebody, and that's just one guy in the huddle with that. Hawkinson is that way. You saw how smart Hawkinson was, showing up and making plays right away. You see Brian O'Neal, and he's got a captaincy on his shirt. I mean, there's a lot of guys in that huddle, Adam Thielen, who are there to help JJ McCarthy. He's not alone. He doesn't have to go out there and do it all himself. Dystopia and Utopia, it's all smoke and mirrors. Jalen Johnson will play. Yeah, I don't know. He didn't practice a lot. We'll have to see. Did not practice a lot during training camp. So can he play the full game at 100%? Kurt says, my prediction is the zone is flooded with memes and videos of McCarthy meditating before the game, and he goes for 20 for 30, 285, 2 touchdowns, and 1 rushing touchdown. I guess I don't know. I didn't ever look in preseason whether he did the meditation out in front of everyone or if he's changed that and does something else these days. I don't know. But I think 20 for 30 with 285 and 3 overall touchdowns would be a lot. That's a really, really good game. That is a really, really good game. And my reasonable expectation is not as high as that. My reasonable expectation would be something a little bit closer to what Vegas has it at 220, maybe 230, 240, and 2 touchdowns, maybe 1 mistake, and then you end up winning the game. And he looks in control, and it's solid, and that's where I set a reasonable expectation. What did Sam Darnold do last year in the first game of the season against the Giants? I don't know what he did. I was there, so I know what he did. I don't remember his exact stat line. I should. He was, 19 for 24 that's pretty high for a completion percentage, but 19 for 24, 208 yards, 2 touchdowns, 1 pick. Let's say that that's 16 for 24 or 15 for 24 with 208 yards, 2 touchdowns, and a pick. That would be good. That's a reasonable expectation for JJ McCarthy. Just Darnold was very good that day, and the Giants are very bad. Sloth, yeah, you do remember the Nahshon Wright for Andrew Booth trade. I mean, who doesn't? I remember it. I remember it well. Not one of the ones that worked out for anybody. I think that Booth got cut this year, didn't he? I think Booth did get cut by the Dallas Cowboys. As if, that was because the Trayvon Diggs was coming back, but also Andrew Booth just, can't play. But if you're talking about a guy that was cut by this team is now potentially starting, that's what you'd like to see if you're the Vikings. You would much rather see Nahshon Wright than Jalen Johnson, who's one of the best. So, all right, great stuff. Great stuff. Let's see. We've got a couple of minutes here, more before 9 o'clock. That's when the fantasy show coming up. Actually, I can really run it anytime I want, but I want to keep answering your questions. And usually it's about 2 hours in when the dog starts going crazy and needs to go outside. Let's see. Buckeye says, when will Mason become 1A instead of 1B? It's a good question. I don't know if that's ever going to happen at this point this season. If there's health, then yeah. But the dynamic element of, and I know I use that word a lot, but it's just so perfectly descriptive for what the Vikings have. When we talk about an Andrew Van Ginkel, like dynamic, or Metellus, guys who could do a lot of things. And Aaron Jones is special. And I did ask McCarthy about that today, and he talked about just how having Aaron Jones in his hands is really unique. And he said, we could line that guy up in the slot and he'd be fine as a slot receiver. Like, he's that good at catching the football. And if you're that good at catching the ball, and also Jones can handle pass protection, there's just a more likelihood that he's going to be on the field more often because he could do more things. But I think they will use Mason a lot. And I also don't think that Mason is totally one-dimensional either. I think that Mason is very capable of running the football 20 times and being a starter and all those things, because he's done that. He did that last year. But if you're talking about the duo and 1A, 1B, and who's going to be 1A, you're not taking Aaron Jones out of that, even if Mason is running more successful because of the pass element. And there is nothing better. You know, when I talked to Kurt Warner not too long ago for a story, purpleinsider.football, when I talked to him for a story, he was telling me that in his first couple of games starting, because I asked him about his advice for JJ McCarthy, and his big thing was use your running back, man. Like, he used the heck out of Marshall Faulk, and if he didn't totally believe in a throw downfield, he was just checking it down to Marshall Faulk. And okay, Marshall Faulk's one of the best ever, but Aaron Jones is one of the best at catching the ball over the last decade. That he's really good at that, and he should use him as much as possible, which may keep Mason off the field a little bit more. I still think it's 55-45, close to 50-50, somewhere in that ballpark, because Mason's going to be different when running the ball. Just a Super Bowl Vike. Am I delusional or not? The Vikings, to me, with their starters on defense, look like a top 3 defense. If they do have a top defense, they could definitely be a Super Bowl contender. So when it comes to where they finish as a ranking, if the schedule plays out the way that it looks, and they play this many great quarterbacks, if these quarterbacks don't get hurt, like, who knows, right? I mean, they might not even face Michael Penix, right? We don't know who's going to get hurt along the way. But let's just assume, based on what we know right now, that it is Penix and Burrow and whatever Aaron Rodgers has in store. And then it's Goff and it's Herbert and it's Hurts and it's all these Lamar and it's all these really good quarterbacks that they end up going against. If they finish with, say, the 8th best defense in the league against this schedule, you can go into the Super Bowl. I mean, you could go into the playoffs thinking you have a Super Bowl caliber defense if you take on this schedule and that's where you finish. Last year, if you were, top 5, you may not have even been quite as good. I mean, I think the defense was really good, but I don't think it was quite as great as their top 5 ranking. I think if we had some sort of way to, use the strength of schedule to tell us like how good were the offenses that you faced, and maybe there's some analytics out there. Well, that's kind of what DVOA does. DVOA is the used to be Football Outsiders stat, Aaron Schatz. It kind of does that. I think it still had them as a good defense, but I don't know if it had them as this unbelievable defense in the second half of the year. Ben, tune into Matthew Coller's Take Machine. That's good. Maybe I'll have to make it that. Maybe I will have to make it the Take Machine. Time for the Take Machine, folks. Every game, one take. Kansas City, LA. Mahomes is dusted. He's washed, folks. He got too in love with the Taylor Swift and didn't look at the playbook. Give me the Chargers all day. I'm terrible at that. I am terrible at that. Let's that be the end of the Take Machine right there. Thank you, Purple Jesus, for the super chat. And you're probably glad you did that before the last 30 seconds. Let's see. Now here's a guy. Well, yeah, that we definitely do that with a lot of players on this team. Jalen Redmond was my other pick, by the way, other than Theo Jackson, of a guy who is actually going to have to be pretty important for this team. I think Redmond's going to have to play a lot, and he's taken a big step up. Kurt Pluppy, thoughts on the Indianapolis defense, Blackman and Bynum duo. I think that's a very talented team that doesn't know what to do at quarterback. I mean, if they have to start Blackman, I'd be concerned, but Bynum's a good player. They've got good players. They just do not know what to do at QB. That's what happens when you put everything into a project quarterback, force him out on the field, get him hurt. Then everything else that you did to build around him it means nothing. I shot you 99. Do you think that Trayvon Diggs is worth trading for if needed? You have to wait and see if Trayvon Diggs ends up on the market and what he looks like coming off of his injury. That would be a hard one. I mean, I think Diggs is great, but does he play like they want him to play? Seems like discipline is important, at least how unhappy they were at times with Dwight McGlothern, trying to get interceptions. Do they want that? Or do they want, guys who take their chances, but also are not giving up big plays? I don't know. It looks like the Cowboys are passive aggressively keeping everyone and paying everyone just to be like, we don't need Micah Parsons. We're good. We're paying these other guys. We're fine. No big deal. So, Not a Twerk says, I might have to go dark for the rest of the week. You got me amped up for the game that isn't going to happen until Monday night. Hey, it's that we have waited a long time, my friend. We have all waited a long time for football. I think everybody, look, the way the guys were even walking around the locker room today, everybody's ready for this. Everybody is ready for this to start. Jay, who's my favorite Vikings quarterback of all time, is Jeff George. Of course it's Jeff George. That 99 season, it's the one that I watch the most. When I just go back, watch random games. I've been watching, this just tells you about where I'm at in life. I've been watching a lot of the 2003 Monday Night Football schedule because it was Madden and Al Michaels. And I bought this book about John Madden. And so I've been wanting to read it. So I wanted to watch some Madden, like some later Madden, because I was just curious. I grew up watching all the Summerall and Madden games, but I didn't have any recollection of him and Al Michaels. And the reason I think was because I was working at McDonald's during that time, 2003, as a high school kid, and I was closing the store all the time and never got to see Monday Night Football. So I've been enjoying going back and watching these games. And that's neither here nor there. It's just that when I watch a lot of old games, I often go back and watch those Jeff George ones. And I watched his entire season for the Raiders, where he threw for like 4,000 yards and went 4-12. It was so much fun. So he's my favorite to watch of all time. The favorite that I've covered would be a little bit different because, it's hard to make like favorites. I talked to Kirk more than anybody else because I covered him for the longest. It's funny about covering Kirk was it was a lot more frustrating to talk with fans about Kirk than it was to actually talk to Kirk. Like, he's a pretty nice guy, pretty easy to deal with. That went fine for all the years that he was here. Wrote some stories with him, all that sort of stuff. But on the outside, every time I got home and opened up my Twitter, it was a little bit different during that time. But, Case was really fun. Every one of them's different. Bradford was interesting because that was when I first got here. I enjoyed covering Sam Darnold, kind of a straightforward type of guy. Really fun season. It's all different. Lean into Matthew's terrible take machine. All right, let's try again. Let's see what game we got here. Next one on the list is Giants Commanders. Jaden Daniels will win 11 Super Bowls, at least. If, in fact, now that I've set the bar that high, if he doesn't win double-digit Super Bowls, he's the biggest bust of all time. So he's going to win week 1 against the Giants. Matthew Coller's terrible take machine. Was Mr. Mankato ever picked? It was 2 guys for me. For me, I don't know if there's an official thing anymore. There used to be once upon a time. But for me, it was Elijah Williams and Max Brosmer were the Mr. Mankato winners. That's who I had. But Max Brosmer certainly deserved it. But Elijah Williams is one of the all-time, where did this guy come from? Morgan State, didn't even show up till rookie minicamp. So but I think a lot of people wanted Brosmer, totally deserved. Go for quarterback, undrafted, played great. I had both of them. Will Reichert's stat line for Monday. I'll say 2 field goals. 2 field goals. Guitar person, clearly a little older than me. Joe Cap. Anybody who grew up in that era, usually Joe Cap is your favorite quarterback. Even though it was only that 1 year, but that 1 year was unbelievable. William, will there be any highlights in the punting game? Maybe. That's when I think about previewing that game, that comes up. So Andrew Kramer and I tomorrow are going to record, but we're going to run it on Saturday night or Friday night, probably Friday night. We're going to run our hardcore preview where we go through like every position, the matchups, all that stuff. You could bet Miles Price in that punting game's coming up. Kurt says, my hot take on draft night 2024 was that McCarthy was going to be unanimously considered the best quarterback of the draft within 3 years. Well, Jaden Daniels has already put himself way up there. The rest is yet to be determined, though. The rest is yet to be determined. Kirk Cousins is a total fraud. I didn't think there was anything fraudulent about Kirk. I think he was who he was. The issue always came down to a couple of different things. How much he got paid, how restrictive his contracts were. It wasn't just how much money went in his pocket. It was, if you're going to sign fully guaranteed short-term deals, there's not much you could do there. There's not a whole lot of wiggle room outside of extensions, and he knows that, and that's why they did it that way. So he would always have to be kind of on his way to the next extension, but it didn't help the team sign anybody. And then physical limitations. At the end of the day, you need somebody to do something special. You need somebody to make a play, and that's hard for a guy who, I remember looking this up on relative athletic scores, that the only quarterback in the league, I think when I looked this up, maybe it's 2022 or 2021, whatever it was, the only quarterback in the league with a lower athletic score based on his combine was Nick Foles. It's just, and yeah, I know he won a Super Bowl. He's also on a really good team and only had to play a couple games and get hot. But it's hard to win week in and week out. It's hard to win in the playoffs. It's hard to take over games when you just don't have the physical gifts of some other quarterbacks. And that's where, McCarthy, he lives in between. Like, he's not Josh Allen, but he's certainly a high level athlete with his arm strength and his playmaking and his quickness and his speed. And that was always the thing I kept coming back to, is you need somebody who's a playmaker. Like, the pocket's going to break down and you can't just stand there and pat the ball and get strip sacked. But as far, like, he was a great quarterback overall, a great career for Kirk Cousins as a 4th round draft pick to, play as many seasons, be a starter for as long as he was, win as many games as he did, put up the numbers that he did. If you draft a quarterback and they turn out to be as good as him, you're going to have a chance to win, but probably only on their rookie contract. But he had overall a good career, and I got along with him fine. It was just the internet had its problems. I think Randall Cunningham. Yeah. Randall was one of my all-time favorites as a kid with the Eagles. I used to play with this SNES video game with Randall Cunningham, and then we had to ban him. That was the original Michael Vick for Madden 04 was Randall Cunningham with my brother and I, where you just couldn't use him because you could run all the time. But Randall's story was great. His football life is really good too. Steven, Adam Thielen is on the depth chart listed as punt returner 2. Yeah, I think I said last night that I was going to give every person watching or listening $50 if he returns a punt. So maybe I'm going to be in for it there. We'll see. Okay, I think you got the entire rundown here of analysis from today. Very interesting stuff. I'm going to have a complete write-up over at the newsletter. Want to remind you, though, before I bring you the fantasy show, it's a great discussion with Mike Shope, fantasy expert here, where we just go through the games. We go through 4 really good and interesting games, including as a preview for tomorrow with Dallas and Philly, and we talk about some cool and interesting props, how the quarterbacks match up, those sorts of things. Tommy Kramer's a great answer. Tommy Kramer's a great. People love Tommy Kramer. They've had a lot of lovable quarterbacks over the years. Do I think McCarthy is done growing? I'm not a biologist, but I think that there's still a little bit more room to grow physically. Yeah. But I don't know how I would figure that out. I think you could get a little bigger, as you continue to lift weights and grow. When do you become like a real boy? Like 24, 25? I don't know. He's going to get, yeah, I agree. Jay's going to get stronger. Yeah, that's true. But I don't know how much. I think he's got a good frame to work with. What the heck was I trying to get to? Oh, yes. Oh, just a reminder that if you guys have any interest in the law, that there's a podcast by a friend of mine who supports this show by the name of Denisa Tova and her team at Tova QDRO and Retirement Valuators. But she does a great podcast called Beyond the Bar, where it's not legal stuff, it's personal stuff about lawyers and judges. And sometimes a random celebrity like myself pops on to talk about my book because Denisa and her husband Glenn are big fans of the show. But for the most part, it goes into what happens at not the times that lawyers are standing in front of judges in courtrooms. What is their life like? What makes them laugh? What's their sense of humor? What is it really like to be a part of the law? That's what the Beyond the Bar podcast does. So you're going to want to check that out. The way she describes it, I like this, is like a locker room regroup with folks from across the legal field, sharing how they got into the game, what they would tell new people getting into the law. So look, if you know somebody who's going to college, looking for their law degree, Beyond the Bar might be quite interesting there as well. And if you happen to be in the very specific area of divorce law, Denisa also runs a forensic retirement lab. If you're a divorce lawyer and your client's 401k or IRA was around before the marriage, now it's all blended together, she can help you untangle it with her settlement language lab. That is also free, by the way. So make sure you go check her out on LinkedIn, Denisa Tova, Denisa Tova. Let her know that you heard about her on the show and ask for that settlement lab. So thanks again to her for her huge support. And thank you all tonight for your huge support and your great conversation tonight. Kurt says, do you feel like Flores envisions using Turner like Dante Hightower? That was his LB coach in New England. I do think that there is going to be that sort of role where it's not one thing. It's not just an edge rusher. And when he came out in the draft, I think the one criticism of Turner was that he wasn't that huge. He wasn't this 6'5", 280-pound defensive end or something. He was much more of a linebacker type of size and has very unique physical traits in terms of his quickness and his strength for his size. So I don't know if exactly like Hightower, because he was more of an off-ball linebacker and he would rush up the middle a lot. And I think that Turner is going to be an edge player, but they're going to use him in different ways. I'll be very interested. All right, so every Wednesday night, myself and Mike Shope do the fantasy show. It's a lot of fun. If you're not a big fantasy player, we're just talking about projecting football players and what's going to happen this week. So that is what we did with some FanDuel props. So here's that conversation with myself and my friend Mike. All right, we welcome into the show Mike Shope for the Purple Insider Fantasy Shope. Mike Shope, WGR 550, also hosting on ADP Chasing, and it is now the first Tuesday of every month that you are hosting on ADP Chasing. Great outlet if people want to go check that out on YouTube. Mike, we got real football. I absolutely cannot wait to break down. I picked 4 games that are of interest to Vikings fans, including Vikings-Bears, and I have 3 props each that we are going to go through today. But I have to start out the show by telling you a little fantasy football horror story. I thought, you know what I should do before week 1? I should make sure that I got a fresh fantasy team to show Mike and have you be proud of me as the fantasy football expert. Oh, great draft. You've improved so much since last year. You've learned so much. And so I got into, FanDuel room, and okay, it's a 10-person draft, little snake draft action, $10 to win 90, very much my speed. So I set it up. It's like, okay.
Winner takes all.
Yeah, exactly. All in. So, all right, we need 3 more people. Okay, well, let me go mow the lawn real quick, take out the dog, get those extra people, then I'll be ready. Come back, and the draft is done. So, and then when I looked at it, you know how it gives you the projections, like here's what your projected score is. My projection was the worst of anyone's by far. And my number 1 overall pick was Bo Nix. So
what?
It didn't go the best. And I'm not sure how any of that happened, but I'm going to tell you my team. And then you could tell me, am I just completely screwed, or do I have a chance? Okay. So here's my team. I got Bo Nix, Jalen Warren, which I feel pretty good about in the backfield, Travis Etienne, which I do not feel all that good about, and then receivers Brian Thomas, T. Higgins, and Emeka Egbuka. And that's the team.
That's it? 6 rounds?
Yep, that's the team.
So it's a one quarterback league where you drafted Bo Nix first. Why would that be possible? How would that be possible?
I don't have a good
You're
answer.
Not using your own rankings.
No. It just was like automatically
That'd
set
be a
up.
Story.
Yeah, if I had Bo Nix. I don't know how this happened, but this was how it just I just clicked, auto draft or something must have been clicked on automatically, and then it just bang 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 and
right. I mean, some sites, I'm not sure with FanDuel, some sites will automatically move you to auto draft after one missed pick. Sometimes it's 2, sometimes it's never. Egbuka, Higgins, and who?
Thomas. Brian Thomas.
Okay.
Not terrible for the wide receivers.
No, it's not. It's not terrible, but you're dead. I mean, like Knicks, if you're playing in a 16 league, I don't even know how that works. Like, no, I can't see a path, but you'll be back. I mean, I think you're a reluctant hero. I mean, you sort of want to involve fantasy football within the Purple Insider domain, which I am grateful for, but you're not yet somebody, which I think is probably, I guess I should mean this, and I do as a compliment, that is drafting constantly.
Right.
So as someone drafting constantly, I got autoed a dozen or so times, I would have to admit, over the last 2 weeks, as all the slow drafts grinded to a halt and the 8-hour clock, which was very convenient and manageable, became a 1-hour clock, which was like, and then I think it even went to 15 minutes on some sites. So they got to get these things in before the season starts. I mean, you tell me what you think the ceiling is for Bo Nix. The line I've used all the time on him after last year, which, it's pretty good. As a rookie, he had more passing yards, more passing touchdowns, and a higher completion percentage than Josh Allen as a rookie. So, there is the potential for numbers there, and I think Peyton is, clearly proven as a play caller, but I don't know, just doesn't seem like somebody you would need to have in this format.
It does not seem all that promising. I am very intrigued by Jaylen Warren in the backfield of the Pittsburgh Steelers. I think a lot of people thought that Caleb Johnson getting drafted there would just win that job and maybe they'd have a duo, but from what I've read, it doesn't really seem that way. And I think the receivers can compete with a lot of different teams. But at the quarterback position, the one thing I would give Bo Nix is that he does run a lot. And when you can get those extra yards, maybe he scrambles for a couple touchdowns. But I've not been the highest on Bo Nix this offseason just because I think there's a ceiling there. And if you look at last year and really start to pick it apart, the end of the year, they had a crazy run of bad teams that they faced. And he racked up 4 extra touchdowns in a meaningless end of the season game, which wouldn't have even counted in most fantasy leagues in the playoffs. And I just wonder if some of those stats were a little bit pumped up, but I do think he is a guy that either throws to his first read or scrambles, which could result in 400, 500 extra rushing yards, 5 or 6 touchdowns, something like that. But when you're asking Bo Nix to compete in a small league like this versus Lamar Jackson and Josh Allen and Jalen Hurts and all the fantasy heroes, I think I am in a lot of trouble. But I did want to go back. I wanted to ask the auto draft. What were you thinking there? What were you thinking, auto draft? Because I wouldn't have done that. And then Travis Etienne, I don't know. I haven't read up on the Jaguars backfield, but he just got relegated last year to a backup role. And I don't know he's Trevor Etienne. Trevor
Etienne is the rookie that Carolina picked.
Okay, no, it is Travis Etienne. Okay, it is Travis Etienne.
Hopefully he didn't have that.
No, the kick return. But no, it is Travis Etienne. I don't know what his deal is.
It's going to be this always happens every year. It's why this week is so great. One of the many interesting storylines to track around the NFL, Jacksonville, Carolina.
Yeah.
In week 1.
Yep.
I often get those teams confused.
Hall of Fame game 95 matchup.
Both light blue. But it's Ted McMillan and Travis Hunter potentially, and then Hunter on the other side. My most drafted player in almost 300 leagues this summer was Bashal Tutin, the rookie that Jacksonville picked. And there are 2 or 3 fundamental reasons. I mean, by far. So I'm definitely out on the wire when it comes to this player. But it's that there's a new coach and GM in Jacksonville. So all bets are off with the guys they've already, built in, ETN and Tank Bigsby. Also, Tutin was an athletic freak. He's somebody that I think was, if you dived in on this year in the draft and how deep the running back prospects were and how excellent the class was, he's somebody whose name you would know. Like, all right, so is this going to be a day 2 pick or day 3? And you had a half a dozen guys, if not more, like him in this respect. So he goes to a team with new management, and I mean, a lot of people are they're making their last call bets on Trevor Lawrence on that offense with Thomas, who's so good. You got him. You got a Jacksonville connection there at least. So if they're the best offense in the league, you probably will benefit on both sides of that. Although you wish Lawrence was your quarterback if you had to do it over. But ETN, he's never been anybody, even out of college, out of Clemson, there were enough analysts in the industry sort of bringing him down as a pass catcher and sort of as an overall talent. They had just such a perfect setup there. Look at the players on that team that won. And so he's always been somebody for me that's been, in the end, a disappointment in Jacksonville. He got the volume. Doug Peterson, at least once, maybe twice, admitted to the media, yeah, we've overused him. So volume-wise, which is number 1 when it comes to running backs in fantasy, fine. But I just didn't think that was going to repeat. And so here we go. Bashal Tutin, let's fly.
I mean, look, we're very back if we're talking about Bashal Tutin. But, our friend Chris Trapasso is kind of obsessed with him. Loved him coming out of college. So you never, the backfield, you never know. When you dropped the factoid on me the other day that Raheem Mostert had led the NFL in touchdowns 2 years ago, I was like, hey, anything can happen in the backfield. But
Jamal Williams the year before.
Oh, right. Yeah. So we've got a bunch of games here, and I would love to spend 4 hours going through every prop of every game because it's just so interesting. But instead, I picked out 4 games and 3 props for each game. And I want you to break them down. So we're going to start out with just the first game of the National Football League season, which is Dallas and Philadelphia. And what I've got for each game is obviously the quarterback. So we could talk about what the quarterbacks are going to do and the yardage props on FanDuel. And then I've got some other ones just picked out based on the game. So Jalen Hurts, 212.5 yards, and Dak Prescott at 248.5. Here's what I want to do. I want to ask you which one is the better over for these props, unless stated otherwise. Which one would be the better over? Is it Jalen Hurts at 212 or is it Dak Prescott at 248.5?
Well, easily Prescott is my answer. Like if it's 8.5, which is the number that FanDuel has up as we're talking, and it's moved up a little bit since the Parsons trade, the most likely game script is that Philadelphia dominates on the ground, which they did all year last year. I mean, they threw so few passes, which, caps, obviously would cap any quarterback's passing upside. So the most likely game script here is you get a game where Philadelphia gradually shows superior, and Prescott, Lamb, and Pickens and Ferguson. I love drafting all those guys this year because I think the upside is so high, and it went up because of the Parsons trade. So it even went up a little bit more. I mean, Prescott has been a 4,500-yard passer on pace every year. He's been hurt a couple times, but I thought he was a good MVP bet before Parsons was traded. Now I think there's just no chance they'll win enough games. But I love their upside. I think 248 is a pretty safe number to bet the over there. And if I'm right, then you'd want the under on Hurts. I mean, they, again, just did not have to push it. And if you think this is a game where, maybe Philadelphia isn't on point, Dallas does a little better than we thought, then you should be able to clear 212.5 if that was the number on Hurts. But I think you'd want to correlate that, which for me would be over on Prescott and under on Hurts.
Yeah, I agree with you there, especially just because the way we could see this playing out is, let's say, 17-7 at halftime. Dallas has to come out and just throw like crazy. Also, I was looking at, I found out today who the running back of the Dallas Cowboys is. I honestly could not have told you. Javonte Williams is their running back.
I guess. Yeah.
What else are you going to do other than throw the football? I think that their entire offense is going to have to be throwing the ball. So every week might have to be overs for Dak Prescott. There was that, I don't know why it sticks in my brain because there's probably 100 other examples of this, but the time that John Kitna had a 2-win team or something and threw for 4,000 yards, it just sort of reminds me like this team shouldn't be all that good, but Dak Prescott could throw for 5,000 yards because he's going to have to. The better example is probably just last year's Bengals. That defense was so bad for Cincinnati, and Burrow just threw and threw and threw and threw. And I could see Prescott having to do the same thing, and he's got the weapons to be able to do it, but doesn't have the defense to be able to slow down anybody, I think, at this point.
Yeah, I think for that kind of game script, which, as you're saying, Dallas could have a bushel of those, the running back you'd want is Jaden Blue. The rookie, like he's good. He's not big, but he's going to be their pass catching back. And if he's sort of ready, he had an ankle sprain more than a week ago, but he's off the injury report for this game. And it's the kind of game where if he's like NFL speed, that's 7 or 8 catches sometimes. Like just dump offs under pressure. Here come the Eagles. So I think Blue that's an over prop for me. Again, if you make sure it correlates. If this is the game you have in mind, long term, Dallas might have lots of problems, or we might do what we've ended up doing in the past when it comes to defensive players. And, we shouldn't really have worried about that. I think the question with the Cowboys is, will they implode from this news? What were they thinking they were? I mean, Prescott has quarterbacked many good teams, and this could be one where the Parsons, the charade with Jerry Jones is so embarrassing that it gets away from them. And so then it doesn't become a Kitna or a Blake Bortles season where like nobody really thought you were anything anyway. Burrow's team stayed in it as bad as their defense was. And Jamar Chase won the Triple Crown at receiver, which who knew that Triple Crown was actually a thing people said in football until like 2 years ago. But I think, with Prescott, it could get really bad. The risk of mine as a Prescott drafter this year is like if the whole thing just gets imploded because of this news. If it doesn't, there should be a lot of fantasy goodness.
Right. We have seen this team collapse under the weight of the drama. Usually it happens kind of in the playoffs, but I even thought that it happened to some extent last year where they got into a little trouble early and then they just can't dig themselves out of it because their owner comes out and talks after every single game. And the fan base there, I think that there is something real to that with places like Chicago and Dallas that have struggled for a long time, or in Dallas's case, have gotten kind of close, but not really close at times. And they have such massive coverage nationally and such massive fan bases that and either crazy owners or not great owners or not great leadership or whatever. Like, I think that stuff kind of adds up on a team after a while, but I just look at Dallas's roster and I go, I don't think you guys have enough to compete in that division, which means a lot of Dak Prescott throwing the ball. The two other ones that we can do quickly, because I think really them not having Parsons and now what are they is the biggest story here. But A.J. Brown at 69.5 yards or CeeDee Lamb at 71.5, which one is the better over? I do think there's something there with A.J. Brown and Jalen Hurts that seems to be hot and cold with each other. And since they won the Super Bowl, it's like, everything is fine and there's no issues. But that was kind of a big discussion for last year. So I was wondering if they come out and try to, remember when they did the very contrived touchdown dance to show the world that they were okay? I was wondering if we're going to get sort of the same thing. Like, are they going to pump the ball to A.J. Brown early to try to make him happy from the start? Like, hey, remember when you had 157 yards in week 1? Well, when you had 27 in week 3, you can't be mad.
Yes. Along the same lines as the earlier outlook on this game, Lamb over for me, definitely. I mean, I think he's probably wide receiver 2 this offseason in fantasy above Jefferson. The Jefferson injury and then the Parsons trade added to that, and sort of Lamb has, I think, ascended past Jefferson in that way. So 71.5 and the NBC Thursday night opener with a losing game script plus 8.5. I love it. I would be less into a Brown under in kind because of what you said, and also like there can just be a 50-yard fade to the back pylon and like it's touchdown AJ Brown. And if they're going to build a lead, they're going to do it somehow. I mean, Saquon Barkley last year got tackled at the 1-yard line 11 times and never scored on a single one of those drives. Amazing stuff. Like maybe AJ Brown gets tackled at the 1, but if you get 1 or 2 plays like that, you're home. So I don't know that I would bet the over there, but I wouldn't want to bet the under either because there's such a high ceiling with him. And if they get that lead, one big play to him gets you home, almost definitely a 50-yard touchdown, and you're almost sure to win. But Lamb over 71.5, I'm all about.
My third one is Dak Prescott 2.5 rushing attempts, or Saquon Barkley over 18.5 rushing attempts. The reason I threw in Dak Prescott is because I don't think they're going to run Javonte Williams really at all. Prescott doesn't really run anymore, but he's going to scramble 3 times, right?
I don't love either one. If it really gets away from Dallas, then no. Well, I guess it could happen that way, but my instinct to your question was more the type that the game is so bad for them. I don't really think that about this game. Like, I think Dallas is probably potent enough to get us into the third quarter, at least with the Eagles. So, yeah, you could get 3 rushes, but those quarterback props are just like, they're just sort of putting the bait out, you know. What do you think? Will he run 3 times? Doesn't seem like very much. Couple of big rushes, he goes around the end. I mean, I would probably stay away. Barkley, 18.5. They have been using Will Shipley, or at least I can't say they've been using him because it's only been the preseason and that's irrelevant. But the speculation around the Eagles is they might do a little bit more with their backup. Again, if they have the lead, they could do that. And, you know, preserving Barkley after just an absolutely massive season for touches would make sense. Don't love the over on either.
That has been my offseason. I don't know if it's that hot of a take, but it's a little bit just based on how running backs have fared after they run for 2,000 yards. It's never the same. It doesn't mean it's terrible, but it's just never the same. So I would be hitting some Saquon Barkley unders. For week 1, though, he's probably pretty jacked up to play. And if they're ahead, then, you know, maybe. But that one for long term, I don't think it's going to be the same as it was last year. Next game is Kansas City and the LA Chargers. We have Stan Humphries and Elvis Gerback starting, Kimball Anders in the backfield, and let's see, Natrone Means would have been back there. Alfred Papunu is blocking for him. It's a great matchup. Marcus Allen is going to score. What a fantasy darling he would have been. Anyway, in real life, Patrick Mahomes, 240.5 yards, and Justin Herbert, 231.5. Which one is the better over to take?
I like Mahomes, but with these, you need LA to keep up. And in this rivalry, they've done a lot of that. Like they've beaten the Chiefs once or twice, but they've pushed them most of the time. And so you might like the over on both guys. It's just like it's Jim Harbaugh and the rookie Omarion Hampton. Like maybe they're still more of a ball control kind of team. That's how most teams, I think, would approach playing Kansas City. The buzz this offseason on the Chiefs has been, okay, they're ready to go back to being the Chiefs, which is down the field. They will not have Rashee Rice for this game. That's mostly underneath. They do have Worthy. We're hearing more about like a rejuvenated Travis Kelce if he's able to find sort of the way back machine. Hollywood Brown, even, well, I guess Royals is not going to play, but even like Juju, like they've used him in the AFC Championship, he was relevant. I kind of want to see that. I mean, Pacheco seems healthy, but I wonder if the Chiefs, and if they get behind, even better for this, this concept. What if the Chiefs are ready to reestablish as a team? Like, all right, this is the best quarterback in the league. This is the best team in the league, and we're going to show it. And week one, you get all year to prepare for that. So it's assuming a little bit when it comes to Kansas City and their efficiency that we didn't get any of last year. But I'd like Mahomes over that number. And Herbert is more a byproduct of what the Chiefs are able to do. Can the Chargers defense make it a game, which, the spread says is likely. And then maybe you get there with Herbert too. I just don't like for Herbert the running game, sort of the identity of the team, and then also what his receiving options are. I'd be Mahomes here.
I know that the nation is very tired of Kansas City, and they're very tired of Travis Kelce and his podcast and his fiance and all those sorts of things. But athletes that are in the range of Patrick Mahomes historically, your Tom Brady's, your Peyton Manning's, your Kobe Bryant's, your Michael Jordan's, like he's in that. Your Tiger Woods, your Serena Williams, he gets that sort of billing, right? If there's a down moment, there's usually something special on the way, right? For that group. And that's exactly the way I'm thinking about Patrick Mahomes this year. Now, I've wondered, like, hey, could the Chargers actually win that division? Or could, we get really surprised by Denver or something? And the answer is probably not, because of this last offseason and the motivation of getting killed in the Super Bowl, and then also having a bad year overall, which is crazy to say because they reached the Super Bowl, and you and I cover teams that don't get to the Super Bowl. And so we're like, oh, what a bad year it was for Kansas City as they, lost to the Eagles in the Super Bowl, where the Vikings haven't been since the 70s. But the point just being that, I think that would have been I'm taking it personal type of moment for Patrick Mahomes and for Andy Reid, because his offense was just plodding last year and almost frustrating to watch at times. I got tired of watching Patrick Mahomes scramble around and then throw a 2-yard pass and have to convert a 3rd and 8 like time and time again. I think that they probably spent the whole offseason studying even people like Kevin O'Connell, who have found ways to beat 2 deep coverages, where everyone's always doubling Justin Jefferson. They're always playing over the top, and yet he finds ways to beat them. I think that that's probably what they spend a lot of time on. And when it comes to overs and Justin Herbert, I would just never do it because it's Jim Harbaugh and they want to run so much, which does lead me to my next one, which is the better bet here for a touchdown scorer, Xavier Worthy or Omarion Hampton? They have about equal odds on FanDuel to score a touchdown in this game.
Hampton, I think. I mean, Worthy can score on a jet sweep. You can get the big play. Last year, the timing with Mahomes and Worthy didn't really take shape until very late. But as late as the Super Bowl, you got a deep ball touchdown. It started to happen. So if you want to imagine a season where Worthy is ready to really pop and become a bona fide number one, then maybe he, scores in this game and it's not even a big story. But Hampton, I think, will be the bell cow. Najee Harris, okay. I mean, he's available in week one. That was a little bit of a surprise. Did not practice at all. I know that, I think you'd agree, you can't rule out the possibility of teams lying to us constantly. And maybe with Najee Harris, it was really never anything, but he hasn't really played at all, if practiced at all, and he's going to go to Brazil and run against the Chiefs and be relevant. Hampton's a first-round pick. He wasn't everybody's favorite prospect. A lot of people liked him. Harbaugh, Roman, he scores. If they're down in this game, they get into the red zone, I think Hampton pops one in. So I'd rather bet him.
I like that too. And just knowing, again, Jim Harbaugh, like what he's going to lean on, that situation with Najee Harris is pretty interesting. They would have him practicing if he was okay. 100%. They wouldn't. They wouldn't play that game all summer long. Just what are they trying to hide Najee Harris? I know Harbaugh is insane, but I don't think he's that insane. They want their best players practicing. And so maybe we'll see some fireworks in the game. Am I right? You can make that joke if he's okay and he's going to play, right? Then you can make the joke.
Hopefully it's safe to do that.
But if you're going to spend a first round pick on Omarion Hampton, you're going to use him. So I wholeheartedly agree. Now that leads to my third one for this game, which is nobody has a higher number rushing in this game than 47.5, which is Isaiah Pacheco. Anybody go over 50 yards rushing in this game, you think?
Hampton could, Pacheco could. Those numbers have to be a little bit close, right? I don't know Hampton's
yes,
number.
they're separated by 1 yard. Yeah.
Yeah. So I could see both guys doing it. What's always with these, we talked about every week last year with the night games, put it in your mind what kind of game you see. And every pick you make has to fit into that. And so if you see Kansas City as the better team here, and we're talking already here about Mahomes opening it up and the Chiefs trying to make a point, that doesn't mean Isaiah Pacheco can't get to 47 yards. I mean, that's 48, whatever it is. Like that's not crazy at all. It sounds like he's healthy and they're clear number one going into the season. That was in question earlier in the preseason. So I like Pacheco over there, I think. You know, if it's a good night for the offense, it should be a good night for him too.
I think both. Yeah, I think both are pretty easy for me, for him and Hampton to both go over. All right, Green Bay, Detroit. The first prop is Micah Parsons mentions 5,463.5 is the number for Micah Parsons numbers.
It's a good
This is it's, you know, look, I love action. I love off-season action. I love trades. I love breaking them down. I love moves. I hated the timing of this move because it just crushed everything else going into week one on the front page of the discussion of the NFL. So we can move past the conversation, at least till the third prop, and let's start with Jordan Love.
We have a minute then to breathe.
Yeah, we do. Yes. Let's really hold on to these non-Micah Parsons discussion moments in our life. Jordan Love at 234.5 or Jared Goff at 241.5.
Love, I'm buying into the vibes a little bit here. The one closest thing over the course of the summer as a drafter that approached a hot take for me, I'm not a hot take guy. Usually I'm sort of crowdsourcing and trying to build portfolios and percentages and just trying to make sense of it all, is to be off on Detroit. I think the offensive line removals, right? The center retired, Zeitler moved on. Like, I think those could be really significant. Your coordinator is gone. We're kind of hoping as a fantasy community that Jameson Williams is all that, but that's a pretty big, that's pretty big hope because he hasn't been a consistent producer yet in the league. And then you have Isaac Tesla and of course Laporta. So it's probably not going to snow, but this is Jared Goff outdoors. And so not excited really about that. Could be proven wrong. A couple of years ago, they went to Lambeau, and I probably said the same things. It was a night game, and they just killed it. St. Brown just dominated Green Bay. I'm hoping, not for the Vikings' sake, but for sort of football's sake, that finally this year, Green Bay decides, all right, let's put the pedal down. I mean, they invested in the quarterback. They put a first-round pick into a wide receiver. I don't know if Jaden Reed is healthy. That's a weird one because they're talking about Jones fracture, but he's playing anyway, and we don't really know. We tried to break that down on ADP chasing earlier this week. It wasn't easy. Tucker Kraft, everybody likes. Jacobs is still Jacobs, I think. So to the game, sort of feeling the Packers vibes, although I'm not sure Micah Parsons is 100%. Sounds
right.
Like his back is still a thing. But I'll go with Green Bay here. And as run-oriented and as kind of slow, certainly the Rodgers teams there under LaFleur were slow. Their defense has been good. This is where you get burned with the Packers. I don't need to know which wide receiver leads in yards, but Love over, I'll go there.
Yeah, and I think Detroit's going to score. Like, even though Green Bay's defense was very good last year, even if they have Micah Parsons, I don't think they have Micah Parsons for 75 snaps. I think they probably got him for a little less as he continues to recover from a back injury that turned out to be real when I don't think anyone thought it was real. And he also doesn't know the entire defense, even with Khalil Mack when he got traded over from Chicago or to Chicago from the Raiders. I don't think he played the entire game in the first night. Yannick Ngakoue, when he was traded to the Vikings, did not play the entire week 1. So these late acquisitions don't always result in the very first week where that guy just plays a full-time role. Speaking of the wide receiver position, Matthew Golden at 3.5 receptions or Jameson Williams at 3.5 receptions. Golden, to me, Mike, is a swing player, huge swing player for the entire Green Bay Packers season. Like, if he's great right away, like maybe not Justin Jefferson level, but we see rookies come in and have success at that position. If that happens, their offense could be pretty darn dangerous. If it doesn't, then it's just another guy in the league that they have playing wide receiver.
Yeah. Well, where have we started here? That Green Bay and their passing offense, they have a night. And so I'm open to the idea of Golden as his first game in the league having a bigger night. I think I'd like, in both cases, Golden and Williams, yards more than catches, because I think they're both, Golden sort of sounds like this, and Williams is definitely this. He's sort of like the depth of target kind of guys. So depends on what Reed is. If Reed doesn't play, maybe you get Dontavian Wicks instead. But I mean, it's certainly not crazy to think I can get to 4 catches on a good night for the Packers with their rookie. But I think of him more as give me a yards prop. It's not going to be that egregious. Maybe like 38.5 or 40s, something like that. I think I'd rather play that. Williams, this is a cool one. Like, what if Detroit gets challenged in this game or even down? What is Jameson Williams? If you knew all summer when you're drafting in that 5th, 6th, 7th round range, and there's Jameson Williams, but all these other comparable receivers for ADP, Jerry Jeudy, Jacoby Myers, Chris Olave, Roma Dunze, Williams. Williams is the boom bust king when it comes to that. And so if they get down in this game, you want that. You want to see 8 for 100 from Jameson Williams. And, I mean, 8's a lot. They've got St. Brown and Laporta, but, I guess I want him. I'm talking myself into the over on him before Golden. And that's a little bit, again, because I think, maybe Detroit will lose.
I like Golden on this because I think that they're going to want to show off their new toy. And from everything I saw from the Packers media about training camp, it looked like he was their guy right from the start, and he had a very good camp. But with Jameson Williams, he is one of the more kind of an old school boomer bust player where you could see one catch for 27 yards. Like if I'm just throwing out random old players like James Jett or something, where you just the one big play and that's pretty much it for him. Or
wouldn't be the first time on this episode that you've thrown out names of random old players.
Yeah, every once in a while. Well, maybe Kadri Ismail if I'm doing a Viking connection there for the downfield guy.
I Natron Means earlier, but yes.
Yeah, the Natron Means shows up in almost every show for some reason or another. Meweldy Moore came up the other day.
Oh, wow.
This is there's a brand here, but
Yes.
when it comes to Jameson Williams, I mean he is absolutely that type of guy where it's 5 catches for 140 yards or it's kind of nothing, and I don't know which one it's going to be for this game. That might depend on how it goes. It might just depend on how Green Bay ends up playing him. The one thing though about Green Bay is as much as they've jacked up their defense with Micah Parsons, their secondary is still not that great outside of one safety. And that to me is opportunity to go deep down the field. The pass protection will be an issue. I don't know. I think I think you could go either way on this. Okay. The third one is Micah Parsons is minus 140 to record a sack in this game. I would bet against it all day. I mean, Jared Goff just doesn't get sacked a whole heck of a lot.
Right. Agree. Don't know about his back, and he's going to be job one for the Lions. I mean, I'm thinking the Lions have seen him before. I'm thinking of of course, the game in Dallas a couple of years ago that was sort of a controversial finish. So I don't like to bet minus 140 on anything.
Yeah, fair enough. The opposite of Kevin from The Office, who bets, isn't it? If it's something is 10,000 to 1, he bets everything. No matter what it is, if it's 10,000 to 1, he takes it because if it works, he's rich. Okay,
Does it have to be a full sack?
Oh, that's a good question. It just says record a sack, so that is different. That is
does a half count?
Now it's in Green Bay. They're going to give him a half sack if he breathes on the quarterback, right? Just to be like, the scorers play games like that.
Make sure on this one, maybe if he gets 2 halves, would that count?
That is a good question. Okay, there's a big game being played on Monday Night Football between the Minnesota Vikings and Chicago Bears. Let us end there with this. Caleb Williams, 218.5, or JJ McCarthy, 220.5 yards. Which is the better over?
I think Williams, although I do like the Vikings in the game. I think, we've talked this offseason, a lot of us have too, about just like, is Minnesota primed to rein in their pass rate over expected a little bit? And if the Bears are not competent on offense, which usually is safe to expect, but maybe not anymore, then it plays right into the Vikings' hands as a team that, can kind of just do whatever they want. So the Bears have to threaten them. And maybe that'll happen. Everybody loves the Bears' weapons. We all did last year, too. And I just can't ever resist dragging the stat out. 10 yards per opening drive for their entire season last year on offense. New coach, new management. Maybe the Bears are ready for this spot. But love the Vikings roster. And even with Adam Thielen brought in, I don't think they need to be a team that in a game script I'm imagining has to really push it. And we've never seen J.J. McCarthy do that in his life. I mean, just sort of have to throw, 35 passes or some number like that. So if it's Minnesota's game on the road, Bears get frustrated. They'll want to get something out of Williams. I think maybe I can get to that number sooner. But look, I mean, if you pop one to Justin Jefferson in the first quarter for 72 yards, you're going to have, you're going to feel great about that over. I'm with Williams here.
I'm all about Williams on this one and I like how you frame it of what's the game that you imagine. And I imagine a game where Caleb Williams has to play from behind and has to throw a lot and ends up with 278 yards and 5 sacks and an interception and something like that. And the Vikings win 23-13. That's kind of how I could see this going, where McCarthy is getting ahead and then playing from ahead in the same way that he did at Michigan. And I also think that they went out and spent a lot of money on the line and the running backs for a reason, not to let Jordan Mason sit over on the sideline and or whatever pass protects, right? They didn't bring him in for that. They brought him in to get ahead by 10 points and then pound the heck out of the Chicago Bears, whose D-line, whose front seven is just okay. And I think you could stay on the field a lot. And even just watching camp, like JJ McCarthy was perfectly comfortable with 10-yard throws, 7-yard throws, just moving the sticks more than he was going down the field all the time like Sam Darnold was.
Yes. And dare I say it, I mean, the Bears have put a lot into their offensive and defensive lines. There is a scenario here where it doesn't happen for Minnesota on offense. They can't run between the tackles, and McCarthy just sort of the pressure breaks down. There's a not a nightmare scenario, but there's a game here where, for as much as we talk about, or maybe I fixate on Williams and the offense, where the Bears defense at home in week 1 is a problem. And so I could see that too. That's how the Vikings season ended. I mean, I don't have to tell you or your viewers that. So it'd be another reason to fade the McCarthy over.
In Chicago, nightmares are always possible for the Minnesota Vikings. I have learned that over the years. How about a couple of receivers here? Adam Thielen, 32.5 yards, or Rome Odunze, 50.5.
I think I like the over on both. In a vacuum, Thielen, what do you think? Maybe they sort of want to bring him back and have their moments with Adam Thielen as the complement to Jefferson. Addison, of course, is not there. So I think that if he's healthy, I mean, he hasn't really looked old yet. Maybe the last time he did was in Minnesota. I don't know, but it hasn't really sort of been that yet. They just got the trade. If they happen to struggle a little bit game script wise, then I kind of like the over on Thielen, but it feels a little bit like a sucker bet. And then on Odunze, everybody that I know in the Sharp community is in on him. He's the guy this year. Last year was supposed to be DJ Moore. DJ Moore, we've made all the excuses for him for years. Didn't have the quarterback. He's a heavy fade for me this year in fantasy. It was Keenan Allen last year that ended up being the guy there, and no wonder they averaged 10 yards per opening drive. But I think Odunze is a big talent, and I think it's Odunze and then Loveland and eventually Luther Burden on that offense. And Moore is fine, but I just don't see a big year there. So I'll go over on both guys, but Really, it depends on which game script you like. Like if my first hypothetical and the Bears just aren't able to function, you're not going to want the over on anybody. If you see it differently, Odunze would be the one play I would make on their offense.
With Thielen, one of the things that it's a very specific point about McCarthy, but I think he sees the middle of the field really well. And I think he utilizes it. And I think that's where Adam Thielen's going to be all the time. And Thielen still went down the field sometimes last year, but I think he can be that guy who lives underneath in those zones, especially as the defense gets stretched out by Justin Jefferson. And 32 that seems like 3-4 catches. I think that's very reasonable.
Wouldn't you play Hawkinson in this game?
Oh, yes,
With that
100%.
logic too?
Yep, 100%. And I think
he'd be my number one.
I have been super high on the idea of Hawkinson, but the thing that ends up happening for me, because I just know O'Connell's offenses, and it's like, well, what about this guy's targets? Oh, he's got to get a ton. Well, what about that guy's targets? Oh, a million. What about this guy? Thousands. and I was looking at Mike Clay's projections from ESPN, and he's got, Jefferson with 170 and Hawkinson with 120, and it's like, who even gets taken away here? But maybe the answer is nobody. I don't know. So, but I do agree with you there. And well, the last one for this, and we kind of alluded to it, is the over under 1.5 point favorites for the Minnesota Vikings. Would you take the Vikings in this game?
I just think they probably, week one is life on the wire, whoever knows, but they probably have the much better team.
Yeah.
I mean, I think Chicago has done the right things conceptually this offseason. I don't mind them drafting Loveland and Burden like they did, even with the skill position guys they had. Like, that's what this coach is about. But they did more than that. And there's a chance that they look great. In the preseason against Buffalo, they were, it's Bill's backups, but they were like men against boys. Then they went to Kansas City and they got shredded against Mahomes because weirdly, the Chiefs played Mahomes and Kelsey and their guys in the preseason finale, which is weird. So I think the Bears are a really tough guess at this point, but I like so much about how Minnesota is built and their coaches. Really, they have it down. So if McCarthy holds up, I like the Vikes here, and it's not much of a number.
I would definitely pick Minnesota here. I also think it's hard for a coach who has taken over a new franchise versus a coach two coaches, offense and defense. No changes for the Vikings. Same system. A lot of the guys coming back that are their key parts. Even their quarterback has been in this system for 2 years, as opposed to Caleb Williams. I think there's an edge there. And Kevin O'Connell has kind of broken the streak of crazy, horrible things happening to the Vikings at Soldier Field. So we shall see. But every Wednesday, you and I will be doing this here fantasy show presented by our friends over at FanDuel. Appreciate them for that. And I'm just excited, Mike. We talked about who do you draft? What do you do? Let's project all these things. And then we get the answers, and I cannot wait. So thank you for your time.
This is why you run all those laps. This is why you lift all those weights. I've got a couple of drafts left. I'll get to like 294. And who would stop at 294? If you can bang out six quickies there to get to an even 300, that's the plan.
Or you could auto draft the 6 worst drafts you've ever seen, like I did. That was my plan. So I think I'm gonna have to do a real one before we get started. But
don't go outside before.
Yeah, exactly. All right, thanks.